September meeting of the COA committee. We'll get to the agenda and call the roll here in a little bit, but because of this remote process, I need to read some things that those of you that are here in recent months have heard already each month. We're doing this, first of all, we're doing this meeting remotely in accordance with Session Law 2020-3, allowing remote meetings and quasi-judicial hearings during the current declaration of emergency. Each applicant on the agenda has been notified before being placed on the agenda that we would be using this remote format. Everyone has agreed to use that remote format, and we will try to make sure that that is still the case as we begin each matter. Notice has been given of these meetings, it always is, but certainly even more so with this pandemic. So we've provided notice to everybody within 100 feet of each property, and we've made clear to all of them that it would be necessary to advise immediately if they had any objection to this process. And so nothing's on this agenda as to which we've been contacted by an applicant, participant, or somebody else to tell us there's an objection to us proceeding in this way. And as most of you know, we provided notice of this hearing process in the newspaper, on the city's website. We posted signs on the property, so there's been a variety of that. Nextly, everyone who wanted to speak today was required to sign up prior to the meeting to be on a list of speakers that's been provided to us committee members. And everyone's been advised that we'll need to do this oath remotely as well, which is also allowed by the governor's emergency orders and legislation passed by the General Assembly. So I think we have, everything's been posted online. We've all had opportunity to go and look at all these properties. We've all reviewed all this material, and we're aware that in some of these there's been additional material added, and we've had an opportunity to look at that as well. So with that intro out of the way, I will say to you that this committee is the place where rubber meets the road in historic preservation. We are a collection of people living in the historic districts, or historic preservation folks, or architects, attorneys, and all of us care, just like property owners, that we do a good job, that we have a good project, that we increase property values, and that we preserve the assets that are historical to the city of Raleigh. So with that said, I will ask firstly for staff to introduce themselves, and then I will go through the committee members and ask each committee member to say a little bit about why you're on this committee and on the commission and what your background is. So, Tanya, I'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Tanya Tully. I'm the Senior Historic Preservation Planner for the City of Raleigh, and been here 12 years.
Colette?
15. I can't count.
Colette?
Hi, I'm Colette. I am one of the case managers, staff report writers, and I have been here almost 3 years.
Thank you for that. And Erin Morton.
I'm Erin Morton. I'm also a preservation planner for the City of Raleigh, coming up on the 6-month mark.
All right, and I won't ask Ray All, our technology guru, to introduce himself, or Marilyn Graff, but I'll point out to you that Marilyn will be keeping the minutes for us in this endeavor. So those of you that are watching on the screen will see that the faces of the committee today are before you, including mine, if I can remember to start the video. And so Janine, I'll ask you to introduce yourself.
All right, thank you. I'm Janine McAuliffe, and my background is in architecture with a bachelor's and master's degree. I live and work in Raleigh right now as a residential designer, and this is my second term on this commission.
Thank you. John Reese. You're muted.
I'm John Reese. I am an architect and live in the historic Glenwood, Brooklyn neighborhood. And I've been on the committee. This is my first term.
All right, thank you for that. Verche?
Hi, I'm Verche Hyde. I'm also an architect, licensed architect in North Carolina. I live and work in Raleigh also, and this is my first term mission. I think John and I have been here for about 3 months now.
A baptism of fire, I might add. And I'm Nick Fountain. I'm the chair of this committee, and this is my 10th year doing COA, but I had a 6-year gap in the middle. And so it's the 4th year this time, and I live in a Raleigh historic landmark, and I practice law for a living. And now for our esteemed counsel, Francis Raspberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Francis Raspberry. I go by Raz. I'm with the Colley Pridgeon Law Firm, and I'm legal counsel to the committee, and I have been doing this for about 3 years.
Okay, and with that, we'll move to the agenda. First off, I point out that we have 2 summary proceedings today. Summary proceedings are matters that are believed to be non-controversial and relatively routine. But nevertheless, if there's any member of the committee that believes that those matters should be heard as an evidentiary hearing, and the same for anybody in the audience who's listening, you'll speak up and say so. Otherwise, we will understand that they're going to be handled summarily. I see no hands, I hear no voices, so I'll call
Mr. Fountain?
motion. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say for the record that no one signed up in opposition requesting to pull those into hearing.
All right, thank you, and that'll be noted in the minutes. And so at this point, what we need is a motion to approve the agenda for today, and Janine McAuliffe makes that motion, and John Reese seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Raise your hand so I can see it. All right, that carries unanimously, and the agenda is approved. Likewise, you had an opportunity to look at the minutes of the August 27 meeting. I'll take a motion to approve those minutes. Verche makes that motion, and Janine seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. All right, that motion carries. The minutes are approved. And we note for the record that there were 10 minor works approved by staff this past month. And so between those and a full agenda, we are not bored, pandemic or no. And so thank you for that. Now we're going to move to the summary proceedings. And the first one of those is 405 Polk Street, a landscape master plan. I'll entertain a motion that the comments of staff be accepted as the findings of fact, and the action of staff recommends be the action of the committee. And so is there a motion to that effect? And that's a motion from Janine McAuliffe, second by John Reese. Any discussion? All in favor say aye, raise your hand. That carries, and 405 Polk Street is approved. And the next matter is 506 Children Street, and I'll entertain the same motion to accept the comments of staff as our findings of fact and the proposed action as action of the committee. And I have that motion, please. All right, motion by Janine, second by John Reese. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. That carries unanimously, and 506 Children Street is approved. And I will say to the rest of you, that are waiting, if we can have that kind of speed on the rest, then there'll be no complaints from us. So the next one to come up, now we'll move to evidentiary hearings, and the first one is a repeat, which is 1003 West Lenore Street. And I'll ask Aaron Morton to explain this matter to us. We're aware it was here last month.
Mr. Fountain, Tanya Tully here. Do you want to affirm staff now?
I do. I do. What I'd like to do on that one is affirm staff but also Ms. Morris, Mr. Morantz, and Mr. Churchill, who are the people, is that, am I got the right one? Yeah. For this particular matter as well. So if all of you will then respond after I administer oath to you that you swear or affirm that testimony you're about to give in the matter being heard before this committee be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If so, say I do. Ms. Morton?
I do.
Tanya?
I do.
All right, and I don't expect Colette to have to say anything on this one, but Ashley Morris?
I do.
Yeah, hopefully hopefully the sound will work better, Ashley, as we get going here. There was a considerable delay. Ms. Morantz?
I do.
Ms. Churchill?
I do.
Thank you. Thanks all of you. Now, with that having been done, I'll go back to Erin Morton and ask her to explain this proposal and any comments with respect to new submissions.
The case is COA 0073-2020 for 1003 West Lenore Street to construct an addition, alter door and windows, remove deck, construct deck, remove tree, and plant replacement tree. Next slide. Tanya, you can free roll through these photographs. These are a series of photographs that the committee saw last month, varying vantage points of front, side, and rear elevations of the existing house and the existing addition. Staff suggestion is to discuss the scale and massing of the proposed addition in relation to the historic structure and defer for a revised design. Next slide. And we have received new information for this meeting that is not reflected in the staff report, which is a series of examples of similar projects with additions. And I can go through a breakdown of the examples provided in terms of COAs. If you have questions about that, just let me know. Nick, you're muted.
I noticed that if I use the tab on my keyboard, it cuts off the video, so I got to remember to do it the other way. Yeah, technology is a grand thing. I was going to say, Aaron, that I'm not sure that we want to rely upon any of those that are from Oakwood. I think that we have guidelines and an essay with respect to Boylan Heights, and I certainly want to examine anything about Boylan Heights. The other is interesting, but I'm not sure we should rely upon it. And I say that up front for the sake of the applicants. But if you want to walk through these things, Aaron, talk about which ones had a COA, which ones didn't, we'll be glad to receive that information.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I got some feedback. All right, so all examples provided are for contributing buildings in their historic districts. As you noted, Nick, 2 of them are from Oakwood, but all structures are dating roughly to the 1920s. So the first example, 421 Cutler Street, has a rear addition approved by COA in 1997, approved through a previous set of design guidelines. Let's see. 1100 Cabarrus Street has an addition approved by COA in 2014. Also approved under a previous set of design guidelines. The rear addition is fully to the rear of the historic house and inset. And we have notes that the addition roof height is approximately 4 feet taller than the existing gable ridge. Do you want me to review the Oakwood items, Nick?
Let's pass on that for now and
Okay.
see about it. See whether we come back to that or not, and that'll allow me to get to the applicants. And I'll call on Ashley Morris first, and Mr. Raspberry. I think you had comments you wanted to make at the outset.
Yes,
And just one,
briefly. I
Brad,
noticed.
sorry,
Wait, hang on a minute. Let me get this from Raz first, and then we'll come to the whoever's next.
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, we're trying to be a little bit more attentive to this. Ms. Morris has heard this comment before, but since she's appearing for the applicant in the case, I just need to get her to acknowledge she understands she's appearing as a fact witness only and not as a representative, as an attorney would represent a client with arguments and summary of the case and so forth. She is testifying as to facts only.
All right, Ms. Morris, you understand that?
I do.
All right. So now, Ashley, I think we saw what you submitted and the red commentary on the type submission, but we would really like to hear from you. It's apparent that we don't have a new design in front of us, but we understand that you want to comment about how what you have already done might conform, and you'd like for us to think of it in that way. So I'll hand you the ball, Ms. Morris, and let you talk to us, and we'll see where we are after you all make your presentation.
Okay, thank you. We had two major comments at the hearing last time. One was making sure that the addition met the guidelines. So that's why I went back and kind of highlighted areas of the additions page on 66 of the design guidelines, and highlighted the ideas about the reasons why we think this addition still could possibly be approved. And then the second comment was that we didn't show any examples of other approved historic examples of similar additions. And the additions that we included in the additional information, the massing is taller than the historic house. But again, they're more of a background, which is kind of what we're doing. We're trying to bring symmetry back to the house, make the historic front of the house become visually what is noticeable and not this offset addition that was done in the 1980s. You know, the guidelines talk about how important it is about the houses tell their story, reflect their history. Well, this house is doing that, and we're trying to help it along its way. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And I know Jonathan and Lizzie would like to say a few words too.
That'll be fine. I think what I'd like to do is hear from both Mr. Churchill and Ms. Morantz, and then we'll see what the questions are from members of the committee. So Elizabeth Morantz, would you like to proceed?
Yeah, and I'm actually speaking on behalf of Jonathan and I. We're the owners at 1003 West Lenore. First, we just want to say thank you to the committee. We really appreciate the time and attention that you guys have given this project by bringing us back a second time. We know this isn't a typical request since we already have a partial upper addition that was added in the 1980s. And at the last meeting, we feel, or there were a few points made that we would just like to emphasize with you. The proposed addition is an extension of what the existing addition is. We don't feel it compromises or damages the historic character of the roof any more than what is currently there. This extension provides symmetry to the house, and by being set back from the front, it creates a backdrop, allowing the original structure to be the focus once again. We are asking that our project not set a precedence in the historic districts, since the guidelines don't specify situations where previous additions already existed above an original structure. One statement that was made at the last meeting was 2 wrongs don't make a right. And while we understand the sentiment and realize that this is a tricky situation, we feel strongly that what we're proposing would be an improvement more in line with the principles of the RHDC in pursuit of that historic restoration than not. We believe It would be unrealistic to expect any future homeowner to remove the existing addition alone. The existing second story would likely remain in its current state, which has been referred to by many as an eyesore, and incongruous with historic design characteristics of houses in Boylan Heights. So we view this as a solution and as an opportunity to make the best of an awkward situation with what we consider to be a reasonable adjustment. We intend to stay in this home for a long time, and we have nothing but honest intentions. So we really appreciate your time and hope you can allow us to make these improvements. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Committee to comment. I think that we would want to have an opportunity for staff to respond to these comments as well. And I get it that the applicants would like for it to be approved and like to hear guidance suggesting that it might be, even if we were thinking about deferring. But that said, I'll call on each of you in turn to talk to us about what your thoughts are in light of the new information with whatever else is in Boylan Heights and Oakwood, if you want to look at that. So Janine McCall, if you have thoughts.
Well, I want to thank the applicants for bringing the precedents to us. Certainly, I think that speaks to some examples that were approved. I appreciate also the facts about the distance they're set back from the front porch. I know the Cabarrus example is set back 33 feet, and I would just ask if they know what the Cutler Street example was, because just the perception from the street seems more diminished than what the Lenore Street proposal is. So I'm just trying to compare that.
Okay. And on that, Ms. Morris, or one of you?
I don't know that I have any comments.
Some comments? None?
I think it's such a it's a difficult situation, and it's in and where it there's the letter of the law, the spirit of the law, and honestly, I don't know where this project falls. So I don't have any comments. I just think of thoughtfulness in terms of how we approach it. I mean, we understand the issues.
Okay, thanks. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
No, I don't have any comments or anything to add. I think I have an opinion on the issue, but I don't have anything to add right now.
All right. Let me ask you all, do you think that under the circumstance, the best thing to do is to give staff a chance to look at this material and expand their comments if they choose, or and the other thing I can do is find out, do they have a desire to? And then I think the applicants need guidance, but on the other hand, we also have a lot of things to work on besides any one particular matter. So what are the sentiments of the group here?
If this situation had not had an insensitive addition done to it in the 1980s, which is impossible to go back and fix, or not do, I feel that we need to approach this with the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. And if we follow the letter of the law, it would just be a flat no. And I do agree with Janine's comments last time. In fact, it made me rethink my entire thought process about this, because two wrongs don't make a right. I just think that the first wrong was so egregious that the second wrong actually doesn't make the first wrong so bad anymore. That's where I'm at with it.
Thoughts, and if I'm the one that said two wrongs don't make a right and you don't want to be hung with that quote, then okay.
I would agree, and with the evidence presented and the additional photographs presented from the precedents on this, I would say that I'm leaning toward the proposal as designed, kind of like what John said. It's restoring the symmetry, as the owner mentioned. Too, there is value in that, and there's value in that, and how that plays into, I guess, the reestablishment in some way, and the respect of the character of the home and of the overlay district. That's my opinion.
All right, Janine, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, I will say, we do have the opportunity, if we do move forward and approve this, isn't it true we are able to be specific about this particular situation being very unique with how we go forward and consider this one? Isn't that correct? As if we're not necessarily precedent setting, as if there was not that 1980s edition.
I think that that's true, that we could make clear that there was an unfortunate addition that happened before the creation of the district, as I recall, and that because of that, we're looking at this solution, even though it may be more forward on the property than we would otherwise consider appropriate. If that's what we want to do. We can probably work around the precedent problem if that's what we think we ought to do. So I think that the inquiry should be, let's look at our guidelines and think what we are obliged to do. If we think the best thing to do is that all in all, it helps the process. And of course, partly I was thinking, I don't think the unfortunate addition has become historic in its own right. And because it hadn't been that long that it was there, and in some sense it could be ignored, but I certainly understand the problem that the property owners and Ms. Morris have trying to address the situation.
Mr. Fountain?
All right, yeah, I would love to hear comments from staff.
Okay, Tanya Tully here. I just wanted to comment on the concept of precedent. We use that. There aren't actually any true precedents in this COA process. They provide examples, and when you will use the examples to see similar situations where you approved and found Congress similar things, and conversely, we'll see differences between them. So, just a little bit of a language there, and absolutely, Janine, you can, just make the facts clear for, why a particular decision is made on a particular case. And then, that would be if someone were to, try to use this as an example in another situation, they would have to show, well, ours has this same situation or something very close in that manner. So that's all I had. I don't know if Aaron had anything additional.
All right. John Reese, did you have something?
I do. I just wanted to be very specific about the wording, if this is the exact wording out of the guidelines. And in paragraph A of the staff report, it says that in the last half of that sentence, however, sizing and scaling, in addition to visually overpower the building, may be incongruous according to the guidelines. And what that says to me is this addition visually overpowering the front face of this house. And based on what I've seen of the evidence that they've presented, I don't know that that's as much of an issue as I have seen on other projects. And given the fact that they're working with an existing issue up there, carbuncle, the idea of doing what they're doing, in my opinion, may or may not be incongruous, but I'm looking at that first wording there that says visually overpower the building. I do not think it does that.
All right, thank you for that. Further discussion? At this point, I would ordinarily close the public hearing, but before closing the public hearing, now that we've had some discussion, I would ask if the applicants have anything further they want to say, because I don't really want to reopen the hearing after I close it, but I don't want to be sure that we've given you enough guidance as to the thinking that you can make whatever last comments you want to make before we get to making a decision here. Anything else? I don't hear any voices speaking up. I don't hear anything from staff or the applicants.
Nick, give Ray a second to make sure everybody gets unmuted. There's a little bit of a delay there.
All right, so Ms. Morris, anything else from you or Ms. Morantz?
Yeah, we're having problems with the muting because I know you asked the question earlier and we weren't able to answer it. But I'm sorry, this is Ashley Morris. We feel that this addition is the best option for the house as it exists. We are not destroying any historic features. The front facade is still very prominent. We're bringing symmetry back to the original house. We provided multiple examples. We're preserving the site, the trees, the landscaping, and I think it's going to be less noticeable than what's there presently.
All right, anything else?
No, I believe Ms. Morris and Elizabeth have summarized it all perfectly, our feelings. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from staff?
This is Erin.
Then I'm good.
I just wanted to add, I didn't finish at the top of the presentation that there was one additional example provided for 1022 South Street. I just wanted on the record that there was also a COA approved for that rear addition in 2007.
Right. So what I got from that, Aaron, is that there were 3 examples, I believe, brought up from Boylan Heights, and all 3 of those, in fact, did have a COA by some prior meeting.
That's correct. From 1997 to the most recent in 2014.
Not to say that we're not smarter than all those other people, but still, we take note of that. All right, then I'll close the public hearing, and then I'm going to ask Janine McAuliffe if you're inclined to make a motion, and before you do, I'll also ask, as we think about it, we can also give some thought to whether there are things that we could do that would minimize the effect of the addition, mask the size some, even as we try to address prior mistakes or unfortunate additions. But that said, Janine, I'll saddle you with trying to come up with a motion to get us started.
Okay, this is a little challenging. Let me make a comment first as well, and that is, I don't remember which guideline I specifically cited at the last meeting talking about this, but I think, again, the issue for me is 3.2.7, where we're limiting the size and scale of an addition in relationship to the historical home, so it doesn't diminish or visually overpower the building, and adding twice as much of what is there is the way that this feels like it's a challenge to me to meet this guideline. So I don't know if we need to have any further discussion about that, or if you want me to try to make a motion, I can.
Before you make it, and we can see where we are and whether it gets a second if we do make it. But yeah, there was a clause in additions that I can find while we're talking. John Reese.
I just want to, Janine, I just wanted to kind of follow up on what you're suggesting here, and I think that the counter argument to that clause is that implies that any new addition that you add to this house follows that guideline. We are looking at an addition that was put up in the dark of night, well before our visionary, wealth came into this, and regardless of whether we say no or yes, that carbuncle is going to stay there. It's not going to go away. And right now, what they're proposing as I read it here, according to the guideline, it does not visually overpower the building. In most of these situations, though, when that plan has been done, it's really up there and it's obnoxious. It does look like the damn thing's being attacked from the back, But this scenario, again, with that word visually overpowered, I think what's there now visually overpowers it more than what the addition is going to be to it, because it basically creates a backdrop for the house versus a very wacky roof line. That's my 2 cents.
And page 67, which is 3.2 additions in the guidelines. And so, yeah, I think where we were talking last month was 3.2.7. Yeah, and that one is referenced in these staff comments. That said, do you want further discussion from members of the committee? Verche Height.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with John's sentiment about the addition as proposed not visually diminishing the historic building. And I'd also add, I guess, like trying to avoid the sort of design by committee that we've been warned about, but trying to imagine what an addition that in massing and scale, as suggested by the staff, that's visually, I guess, reduced in comparison with the existing, front of the building and then the addition. That visual reduction could potentially do the opposite of what the proposal does.
Okay. Further discussion, Janine?
I wanted just to make a suggestion that perhaps John or Verche might want to try to make a motion with where they're thinking, if that's okay with them. If either of them would like to do that.
That's certainly okay with me, John. You or Verche want to try it?
That's all I can do. And one more thing I'd like to add before I do that is some issue that I've got a little bit is that that doesn't play in the favor of. I think I'm favoring more on the design front than I am in terms of the process front, because I would like to have seen from the applicant some sort of here's the I mean, if we cannot do this, here's the option of what we could possibly do, or is there no other way to solve this problem than
John, Tanya Tully here.
Sure.
The applicants do not have that option. They are not legally allowed to do that. They have to present one application to you, and that is what they do. There is a process in the bylaws where if they want to offer to, apply for two things, but they have to ask your permission first.
Okay, but here's my question. Why it says that the last time we did this, that the staff requested that there be a redesign or a modification to the design.
We did. They chose not to do it. That was their option.
That's all I'm saying is that it would have fared better with me had at least I seen that they tried to do an option that might work. I mean, and maybe there's not another option. Maybe this is the best option. It's just that the effort to kind of justify this one versus coming up with a way to kind of say this is what you're going to get if we do it a different way might have been helpful. That's all.
Well, I think what they're saying is that this is the best option, and this is what they want you to decide upon.
So John, here's where I think they are. They wanted to come back and show you the precedents and hope that we would approve the design that they came with. Now, on the other hand, if the discussion comes around to the view that this one's not going to get approved, then most likely they would ask us or hope that we would defer it rather than deny it. But they really, what they're trying to do is another bite at the apple from last month by strengthening their evidence on precedent.
Well, and that's where I don't think they did, because the precedents are in Oakwood, not in Boylan Heights. And our charge here is to understand the context of the neighborhood that the house is in and work with that fabric of that neighborhood. And to pull examples from a different neighborhood, I don't know about.
Well, now, I think I'll have to disagree there. I think there were several examples from Boylan Heights, but I did point out that maybe we shouldn't look at the ones from Oakwood, but there were several that were in the Boylan Heights, one of them being Cutler, and I've forgotten whether it was one on South Street. I'm trying to remember. But anyway, we do have some that are in Boylan Heights.
Okay.
So, Janine, you were about to comment, I think.
I was just mentioning Cabarrus, but I was muted. Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, Cutler and Cabarrus are at least two of them that are in Boylan Heights. That said, further discussion, John or Verche, one of you want to try a motion here to see if we can move forward?
Verche, you want to try first?
Sure, I'll give it a try. Okay, let's just start reading with based on. Okay. Based on the information contained in the application and staff's evaluation, I motion, that right? And then I go, okay. That constructing an addition and altering doors and windows is not incongruous in concept according to guidelines sections 1.3.1, 1.3.2, 1.3.3, 1.3.6, 7, 8, 2.5.1, 2.5.10, 2.71 and 2, 2.7.9, 2.7.11, 3.2.2, 3.2.4, 5, 6, 3.2.8, 9, and 3.2.11, and 3.2.12. Okay, this is where I'm stuck because I want to also add that it is not incongruous with guidelines 3.2.7 and 3.2.10.
You can just, staff will simply strike the rest of staff's suggested decision. And move 3.2.7 and 3.2.10 up there. So we got it.
Okay. Based on the suggested facts 1 through A 1 through 14, B 1 through 10. I'm floundering here.
That's fine. So let's see if you can get a second to that motion.
Okay.
All right, John Reese seconds the motion.
With,
So we have a motion on the,
with one
we have a motion on the floor. John, I'm not sure I'm hearing you. You got comments?
I would just make one friendly amendment, and that is what Janine brought up, or what we all had kind of discussed of not letting this become something that is, or making the point that this is very specific to this case, and that the existing context is very important to the decision in this.
Okay, and then I also,
I think you could add that, John, on the end of finding of fact A2, something to that effect. Do you see that? That the design concerns or problems in the 1981 edition have rendered this a very difficult project, and the project is ultimately improved by this addition, which would not otherwise be approved. Okay, so there's an amendment, and there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion as to that? Y'all look at these findings because we don't want to be hung with them later. Janine, any thoughts or comments on the motion now that we got a motion and a second?
No, I think that was right.
Okay, anything anybody wants to add? I'll call the question. All in favor, John Reese? All right, his hand went up. Aye. Verche? Aye. Janine? No. And I will vote aye and move the thing forward. Now, so that motion carries, and Verche, you need a follow-up motion basically saying, picking up with the rest of the comment, or that the COA be issued under the following conditions.
okay. I motion that the COA be issued under the following conditions. Sorry, just a quick question, I guess, comment. I would motion that we do not include number 1 as far as the new edition being redesigned.
Right, you delete number 1 and make the motion based on the staff comments 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
And then look at 5 and 6 to see what other conditions need to be there.
Okay. Okay, so I motion that the committee, or that a COA be issued based on conditions 2 through 6. Let's see.
You don't need 5A.
Okay, minus 5A.
I think everything else still applies.
Everything else stays. Okay, okay.
Tanya.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. Okay.
All right, so there's a motion, and John Reese seconds that motion for purpose of discussion. Any discussion from members of the committee? All right, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Raise your hand. Verche Height votes aye. John Reese votes aye. And Janine McCullough votes no. And I vote aye, and the motion carries. And so Ms. Morris turned out to be right to come back another time because we grew weak after the passage of a month. So that takes care of application for 1003 West on North Street, and now we move to 711 South Boylan Avenue, and that one is Becca Newlis and Aaron Morton. Aaron, and Becca, I'm going to administer the oath. Do you and each of you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give, no matter being heard, will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Aaron Morton?
I do.
Becca Knowles?
I do.
Okay, and Ms. Knowles, I hope I said your name right.
Yeah,
Great. Okay, Aaron Morton, will you explain this proposal for us?
this case is COA 0110-2020 for 711 South Boylan Avenue in Boylan Heights. The proposal is to alter the driveway, alter fence, construct rear deck, install hot tub, and landscape alterations. Next. This is a view of the front of the house from South Boylan Avenue. Next. And we're working our way up the driveway and around the back of the house. Next. Further down the driveway, you can see the existing fence there behind the camper. Next. And this is from the back side of the fence looking toward the driveway. Next. And looking to the neighbor, there's a bit of chain link fence there and a mature tree in the corner. Next. Standing next to the tree, looking back down the rear of the house to the east. Next. And we've passed the corner of the house, and this is the rest of the rear yard facing south. Next. And looking back towards the rear elevation of the house and the existing deck. It's not shown in this picture, but a mechanical unit has been approved to be implemented to the right of those stairs. Next. And this is the play area looking back towards the rear yard. Next. And staff suggestion is that the committee discuss the increase of the built area. Next. New information provided for this meeting were updated built area calculations, a photo of the example driveway design and accompanying description, and a picture of the proposed river rock aggregate that they would like to use on the dry stream.
Okay, with that, then, Ms. News, I would love to hear from you at this point. Talk about your project and particularly talk about the amount of lot coverage.
Let's see. So I guess the plan originally was going to be, I think, 64% built area, and we've been able to reduce that down to around like 58% built area. We'll be reducing it by reducing some of the driveway space and adding mulch, and then removing one of the patios in the back that we were going to have be gravel, and we'll make that mulch. And then the pathway that would go from the back gate, or the gate from the driveway over all through the backyard, would also be mulch. So that should get our built area to around, I think it was 58%. I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can pull them up.
I would ask if there's a way that staff can throw up on the screen these the drawings that were submitted in addition. I think there was new stuff added, and if we could walk through that on screen, it would be useful. Be sure we all got that in our head.
It'll take me just a moment. I'll pull them up.
All right, if you can do that, we'll keep talking while you're doing that.
I have them here, but I don't know if I'm able to share my screen.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can.
Okay.
John Reese.
I'm sorry, I would normally grab my little book, but I left it downstairs. Can somebody read to me the section where it talks about the building area 1.3.8 in the guidelines?
This is Aaron. I've got it here. 0.3.8. It's in the residential historic districts. It is not appropriate to alter the residential character of the district. by significantly reducing the proportion of the original built area to open space on a given site through new construction, additions, or surface paving.
And so this applicant is, that's why the commentary about various items being converted to mulch. Are there questions of the applicant from members of the committee? McCall.
Could I just get clarification? It might have been in your additional material, but the driving strip material is what?
The driving strip material are Belgian blocks, and so they would have like a cobblestone look. And then on either side of them, rather than having grass, we were hoping to put, I think it was the number 78 gravel.
Mm-hmm. 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 I've got a question about the site plan real quick that I'm looking at, because I'm a little, the writing on it is so tiny and my eyes are so bad, I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what's what. But the area that you're showing that's really gray, let me get to it. Back there, is that all gravel? This area here?
I'm trying to see what you're holding up. Hold on, let me pin yours, if I can do that.
Okay.
Hold on, John. So I think what you're looking at, I'm having trouble seeing your screen still.
Sorry, my bad. Hang on.
No, I can pull it. Oh, there. Okay, if you do it again.
There. Okay, it's this gray area. Is all of that gravel?
No. Actually, sorry, I'm trying to see. Yes, that would all be gravel, but in our new built area calculation, we're actually going to make some of that mulch to get the built area down to, and I have the number pulled up here, it's at 58.92%, so just about 59%.
Okay, are there further comments or questions from members of the committee? Janine McCollum.
Thank you. My question is, I know staff made a recommendation to be changing that, those driving strips to concrete. What, I just was curious the applicant's reply to that suggestion.
I had emailed in the pictures of the cobblestone just to make sure that we were all clear on what I was wanting, asking if that was still considered to be incongruous with the look of the neighborhood. And I was told to bring it up here with the committee.
Staff's opinion, we couldn't change our staff report. We can say on the record that it is our judgment that it is out of character with the Boylan Heights Historic District.
And can you explain why you consider it out of character?
Because it is not characteristic of the district. You either had gravel driveways or you had concrete strips. Cobblestones were not seen in Boylan Heights. It's a early 20th century neighborhood as opposed to Oakwood, which was, and Glenwood, Brooklyn, which were developed much earlier.
Thank you for that. Are there comments, further or questions from members of the committee? If you raise your hand, I'll call on you. Verche Height.
Yeah, just a couple of comments or I guess questions on the site plan. I think that there's a potential conflict in where you've noted the tree protection area and then where your rendered site plan is showing the extent of the deck. Seems to be in conflict. And then also the planting of, it looks like a pretty large tree right underneath what appears to be an above grade power line. So those are just kind of questions, concerns. Do you have any?
So we do have, hang on, let me pull up the plan. We have been working with our landscape designers to come up with a tree protection plan. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to explain it very well because I'm not the designer, but maybe I could get my husband, he does landscaping, but they are planning to, hey, Chris, what is it they're going to do for the tree protection? The way they're going to put the post in for the deck? What is that called?
They build like a small deck around the tree.
Okay.
That's a tree.
They'll be building a small protective fence around the tree, and then they'll only be going into the ground just for the post of the deck. There will not be any more intrusion into the ground.
Okay, I get that. And Verche, can you tell from that where the fence would actually be, and whether the tree protection they're talking about is anywhere near adequate for that tree?
I mean, where they're showing it, let's see, on L0.59, the protection fence looks to be adequate for the tree. I guess my concern is you install that fence, and then I believe that the edge of that is kind of ghosted in on the rendered site plan. But the deck and where a post might be for that deck is beyond the perimeter. Pretty significantly. It looks like you might have even 2 posts within that perimeter for that tree protection zone.
Let me try to dig up the email to see how they explained they were going to be inserting those. I'm sorry.
No,
not my.
It's fine.
It's not my area.
I guess my whole point is the point of the tree protection zone or tree protection fence is that you wouldn't touch anything on the other side of that. And so there's an overlay conflict between where the extents and the edges of your deck are compared to where you're installing that fencing. So I know that there is a staff note about a revised tree protection plan. Oh no, that the tree protection plan be implemented, but that may need to be looked at a little bit further or revised. Because you're doing work within that tree protected area.
The way it was explained to me was that it would be very, very minimal and we would still be protecting the tree, but I will try. I'm trying to find the email. There's a lot of emails to dig through. But yeah, I mean, we're happy to revisit the plan.
This is Tanya here. As you move forward, Verche, if you're comfortable making that be a condition of approval, should you be approved that it be revised so there's not that conflict. It's certainly understood with tree protection that there are times you are going to be building, in the area. And I think the idea that you're talking about is you don't want there a fence to go up that then has to be moved in order to build it, and that where the fence is, it stays.
Yes,
I think. Okay.
Yes.
So when we get to the end, if you're comfortable with, the revision being approved by staff as a condition, then we can certainly handle it.
Okay.
Would that mean that, oh, sorry.
All right. I'm sorry. Ms. Knowles, did you have something else you wanted to say? Okay, John Reese, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question from the applicant, which helps me just understand something just from your perspective. Why is there so much gravel in this design?
All right, Ms. Knowles.
Okay, sorry, I was unable to unmute myself. I did have a question actually on the tree protection. Would Verche, what you're asking for us to do is actually adjust where the deck is?
Well, she's not asking that. She's saying that you need to have a tree protection plan that actually works, and or that there isn't going to be anything in it but 2 post holes. If that's what you're asking us to agree to.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Thanks.
Now, Ms. Knowles, I want you to go to John Reese's question, which was, can you just tell us why is there so much gravel in this plan?
Well, most of that section that you're referring to is already gravel. It was that way when we purchased this home. if you look at the pictures of the site, the entire front driveway is all gravel.
Mm-hmm.
All right, further questions? Janine McAuliffe.
I was just gonna maybe reference, maybe tell John to take a look. There was some new material that I think was really helpful with an original, existing, and newly proposed sort of arrangement of all these parts and pieces that I think illustrates how the gravel driveway is getting minimized, but with the other parts of the project, we're still growing in built mass. If that happened.
Okay.
So John Reese, the revised material, I believe, is online, but was not in our paper set. And so you got to go into board docs or whatever it's called and call up that file, and then you'll see them. But it is what when the screen was taken over a minute ago, it was those three sets of sketches showing original, current, and proposed. Now, if John's not seeing it, then can we get that back up on the screen so John will see what we want to make this decision based on what the proposal really is?
Oh, that I got. The graphics weren't. I wasn't following the graphics.
All right, John, if we leave this on the screen, can you frame your question with respect to this, to the things you're seeing on the proposed?
Me? Yeah.
So, okay, further questions? John, do you have a question?
No, I'm better off. I'm feeling better about it when I see the new one down there instead of the original one. When you say original, is that your original design? And then exist is what you got there now?
So this house was renovated, I think in 2018, and we purchased it after the renovation. So the original is what it was before we owned the house. Existing is what it is today, and new is our proposal.
Okay.
So it works like sort of 2018, 2019, and 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Now, Rashay Height had a question.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up question on that graphic. I see that the gravel driveway, the approximately 186 square feet of that to the south of the site kind of goes away in your new proposition. What material are you replacing that with?
That would also be a gravel patio area.
Now, let me be sure I understand you, Ms. Newley. Are you? I think she was referring to what I would call the right-hand drive space, and you're talking about having a patio out by the sidewalk?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong area. On the other side, the 186.2 square foot, that is already a gravel drive. We're not proposing to make any changes to that.
Okay, so then with your revised calculations, are you including that? So it just kind of disappears from your new, but it would still be a part of the plan.
Yeah, it would.
Gravel driveway north. Yes, the gravel drive. If you look at, I think page 2 or 3 of the new material, there's a breakdown of all of the built area, and you see gravel driveway south. That is still in there. So that is included in the 59%.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Are there other questions from members of the committee? Okay,
I do
John Reese.
have one question. Our only question about this is how much area of the whole lot is going to be covered over by gravel, basically.
Well, our job is to look at the entire application, but the staff is.
In terms of the most pressing issue that seems to be of contention, it seems to me that the amount of impervious surface or pavered area or graveled area is what kicks in that 1.3.8, and that's the one that's given everybody the most heartburn, if there's any heartburn at all.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
Janine?
Wanted to also clarify 1.3.8 is referring to original historic built area versus what is being proposed. So
really?
Yes.
Okay.
So for example, the original I think was cited, I can't scroll with my hand on the space bar here, but I think it was around 40%. So it isn't that we're looking to see they're increasing by, 10% now, it's really the 20% or whatever that is.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there further questions or comments from members of the committee?
No.
John Rich, you do?
No.
Okay, fine. Anything else from staff on this application?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Lewis, anything else you want to say before we close the public hearing?
Just that impervious surface was mentioned, and all the surfaces we're proposing would be impervious, if I'm using the word correctly. So we're not.
It doesn't drain.
Oh, so they would be pervious. Sorry. They would be, sorry about that. Again,
Yeah.
not my area. So they would all be pervious. Nothing that we are proposing is impervious.
Okay.
Tanya Tully here. Staff would point out that the language that they often coincide, built area and impervious, but that is, or pervious, but that's not the language that's used in the guidelines. So just so you're.
No, I understand that. Yeah, but it does help that it's a pervious, a pervious amount of area versus even though I get it, or I think it makes some sense.
This is Erin. Before we move away from discussion, I wanted to point out the bit in the application about the raised planters that are in the front yard proposed to be removed and potentially relocated. That's in the conditions of the staff report, but if you would mind also speaking about your feelings on congruity there, that'd be helpful.
I do think that they're incongruent. I think that while front gardens, anything that questions from the standard, I think that those planters do that because, yeah, I think staff is very correct in suggesting that they be removed.
Nick, you're muted.
Not supposed to be. I think those need to go in a nutshell. Anything else before we close the public hearing?
I was just going to say we're happy to remove the raised beds. We're already planning to have them removed by November 1st. We just want to harvest the rest of our vegetables and then we'll get them out of there.
This is Erin. I'm sorry, I was not clear on the request. They have agreed to remove them already. The condition and the guidance that staff is looking for is whether relocation in the side yard in front of the rear fence would be considered congruous. We don't have a specific location pointed out yet.
what locations would make them incongruous?
Well, my thought is visibility from the street's a problem.
Given their low height,
I agree with that, Mr. Chairperson, that seeing them from the street, I think is difficult to see how that meets the guidelines. And I guess I wasn't clear that they were proposing to move them. I saw some discussion about relocating, but if that's the proposal, I think we can speak to that in our motion.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? I'm prepared to close the public hearing and move to discussion. Janine McCullough, comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. It's often common to see applicants bring some comparable neighborhood, local, nearby site comparisons for the built areas. And I didn't see that coming through here. And I just wonder, staff, if there's like a recognizable sort of number, range that we find in this district.
This is Tanya here. There is not a specific number in Boylan Heights. It really varies depending on the size of the lot. But around, it's not completely unheard of to see around, 50, 60, 60-ish%.
Any other discussion, members of the committee? Are one of you prepared to make a motion, Janine?
Yes, I would like to. I move that based on the evidence presented in this application and during the evidentiary hearing, that the committee finds that altering the driveway and landscape alterations are not incongruous in concept according to guidelines 1.3.2, 0.6, 0.7.9, 1.3.11, 0.13, 1.5.1, 1.5.5, 0.6, 0.8.9, and 1.5.11. And facts stated 1 through 13. Let's look at this. Yes.
Janine, quick question from staff. You were referring to the amended application or the application as amended?
Oh, do I just?
Yes.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, it is definitely the amended application with the reduced built area.
Now, Janine, you can go ahead with the rest of the motion based on the rear deck.
Yep. And constructing a rear deck and installing a hot tub are not incongruous in concept or non-congruous in concept according to guidelines 1.3.1, 0.2, 0.7, 0.9, 0.11, 0.12, 3.1.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5 through 8, and the following suggested facts. Number 1 through 6, and altering a fence is not incongruous in concept according to guidelines 1.3.1, 0.2, 0.7, 0.11, 1.4.1, 0.2, 0.8, 0.9 through 11, and the following suggested facts 1 through 7.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? All right, Verche Heights seconds the motion now for discussion. I'll tell you that I remain skeptical about the application, but that's just me. Okay.
All right.
Motion and second. Is there further discussion? All right, if you're prepared to vote, I'll call for a vote on the motion. Those in favor, Janine McCullough votes
Yes.
aye. John Reese votes aye. Rashay Height votes aye, and I vote no. And the motion carries. You have a follow-up motion.
Yes, I do. All right. I move that a certificate of appropriateness be approved with the following conditions. 1, 2, and I'd like to say that the front yard planter boxes be removed from visibility from the street by November 1st. 3, yes. 4, I was going to suggest, since there were some different aggregates shown that staff approved, what is available for the dry stream aggregate, the number 4. And then the other conditions, 5, 6, that we have seen a reduction down to 58% in the built area, built mass. So that's taken care of. And 7 and 8, and I think to Brachet's point, just to have staff approve the tree protection plan.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? John Reese seconds the motion. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor will say aye. Janine, aye. Brachet, aye. John Reese, aye. And I vote in favor of it also. So the motion carries, and Ms. Newells, you'll be working with staff going forward on your project. We thank you for your patience with us.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, quick question on the driving strips. Are you guys approving that they can be cobblestone or no? No,
We're not
okay.
approving the cobblestone. There need to be cement strips or gravel.
Okay, or gravel. Okay, no problem. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
The next one is 509 North Boundary, J.P. Royer. File number 113, and so Mr. Royer, if you will, and Colette will be sworn. Do you and each of you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give, no matter being heard to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Colette?
I do.
Mr. Royer?
I do.
Okay, great. Now then, Colette, if you'll explain the project.
Sure, wait one moment while the presentation popped up. This is case COA 0113-2020 for 509 North Boundary Street. It is in the Oakwood Historic District, and the application is to construct a rear addition. Next slide. This is a view of the property from North Boundary Street. Next slide. This is a little to the east, looking at the side of the property. Next slide. This is the rear porch. Next slide. And this is a view of the rear facade from the backyard. Next slide. And this is another view of that rear yard area. And another view. Next slide. And staff's recommendation is to approve with conditions.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Roy, we'll hear from you on that. And I'll start off by saying, I'll ask you to respond to my concern as to why you didn't set in the new addition like the prior back area of the property. Maybe not that much, but at least have a step in going back to the back. But you can talk about your project while you respond to that.
Yes, can you clear? I didn't understand your question. Could you repeat that?
Yes, when I looked at the drawing, it looks like that the addition continues on the same line as the original structure, and though it may be non-contributing, I think it wouldn't look so massive if you had a step in back there, so it would make it a little narrower, a little less usable space, but it would break that line some way.
Okay, I'll respond to that. Well, thank you all for starters for working late on a Thursday night, and this project is. I've been before you a couple times before recently regarding an accessory structure in the rear yard, and now we're working on the addition to our house. And I think last time we spoke, we hadn't moved back, and now we're back and trying to reclaim and repair and do a lot of work to the property. This addition is essentially an extrusion of the existing rear facade, so that the rear porch and the rear wall is being pulled back 20 feet. And to answer your question about the step back, I went back and forth on that very question in the design. And the main reason that I'm not showing it that way is that there's two factors. One is that in terms of making everything on the inside work with the dimension that's narrow already, it was going to have an impact that I wanted to avoid. And secondly, the appearance of that step back, I think, is pretty minimal in terms of how you would see it from the street. The views, some of the images showed that the alley between the houses to see the rear is narrow, and I don't know that that visual impact would be that significant. I think it'd be fairly subtle. So those are the main reasons for the continuation, and I've cited a couple of. Or at least one other addition and COA approved project that employs the same strategy, the continuation of an existing exterior wall. The overall, intent here is to, I guess the big decision around additions is what level of contrast, if any, to pursue. And my approach here really came down to something that I feel like it's a straightforward solution, and that the distinction between old and new, as is the case in some other examples in the district, is really the existence of a corner board of a previous end of the house, and the corner board is the signifier of where the end of that house was. In terms of the shape of the house with the addition, I'm looking at the map of Oakwood that I provided, showing a few different properties and how the width to length or depth ratio is similar. The project at 526 Northeast Street in particular shows a width to depth ratio that's greater than what we're proposing. And you see, narrow and somewhat deep structures in the district. Another component in terms of the impact to the site, I think, is related to the depth. And while this addition will push this house deeper into the yard than the immediate neighbors, there are close by neighbors whose the rear of which their structures extend deep into the backyard as well. And I'm thinking of 527 and 525 and 603 north boundary, all on the same block. I sort of addressed the form being an extrusion and from my perspective, a straightforward approach to the addition, and the materials being proposed matching the existing, taking that same line of thinking of not trying to draw attention necessarily to the distinction between the new and the old, and other than the subtle presence of the corner boards. That's all I would say right now until you have questions for me.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there questions and comments from members of the committee? John Reese.
There we go. I remember when you built this house, JP, and and it was very much a labor of love, not just to the house, but to the neighborhood at the time. And I've always thought that you did a great job with trying to blend that in and trying to work within the context. That was just fantastic. And it is a modern interpretation of a shotgun house, which is a very, very strong reference there. And to the point of whether you should step something back, I don't consider this house a situation where the architect that designed it is dead and we have to kind of honor what he did because it was a set piece in time. This one is, we're still talking to the live architect here, and I considered his vision because I think, if I still remember, JP, you had the idea to expand this thing over time when you first designed it. And so
that's right.
The intent here is completing the master plan. It is not about, in my understanding of this context, where we wouldn't have the architect normally, and we would have to stop his design in place and time so that a new designer can come and attach to the backup. At that stage of the game, a more strong and permanent marker between old and new might be appropriate. At the same time, this house is not contributing to the neighborhood. What we're concerned about is how the design and what JP is proposing is congruous with its context. To me, it is an extrusion. As JP said, I would even argue that you don't even need to put in the corner board, that you could run the siding all the way through, because in that opinion, it is a completion of the master plan. It was visually okay, and it was happy along when it was not finished, but now you're finishing the project. So I think that this is about the neighborhood, not whether that corner board is there.
Okay, well, thank you. And I think the reference, the question whether it's contributing or not, and what impact that might have, does bear on it. But I'm a little bit concerned about the 511 North Boundary Street and the impact for them. Are there questions, comments from others on the committee? Verche Height.
Yes. So I guess one of the referencing guidelines in the staff report is 3.2.1, in which there's a reference to an addition being self-supporting. So I guess my question for the owner and architect is, are you designing this so that it is structurally independent, taking into account that if we did have to kind of freeze where you are in time, and this is an addition that we're considering, is it structurally independent from what's currently there?
I'm not sure that applies to this type of construction, but we'll work our way through that and see what others think about that. Do you have questions or comments, Janine McCullough?
I guess to me, I don't feel as though that guideline sort of needs to work here, only because, not seeing this as a historic project that we need to understand its evolution. I do feel that way because it's not contributing, and it's a very modern in sense of, it being in a historic neighborhood but built, 20 years ago, or sorry, what the date was on it. But I think it's interesting. I don't really feel compelled to see that corner board at all, but I think I'm somewhere between John and Nick, because I think that's a really relentless wall that feels a little kind of, it just doesn't feel very residential to me. And I want to see some type of modulation in it just to kind of break that scale. but I don't think that corner board does anything for me. In fact, it kind of, I agree with John that it could have just all been built that way and just erase that corner board, and it's just, that's a single design there. So I'm a little, I don't know that it's a deal breaker for me, and I'm not trying to redesign this, but I think that is one really, unique wall that feels, just doesn't feel very residential to me in this neighborhood.
I'd like to step in here for a second because, again, I think I understand my charge here is to understand how this addition to this non-contributing building affects the neighborhood in the context of preserving and being congruous with its total whole. I don't see the challenge here as to why it doesn't do that fine. Because again, the impact of this addition being an extrusion is actually more reference to the history of the concept, that being a shotgun house, is is a perfect thought process in my head as to how to approach it. And again, that board, I don't care what you do with the damn board in some regards, because and stepping it back again, I see this as a master plan. And it's a new building. We are not talking about JP the 1 and JP the 2. We're talking about JP, and whether he envisioned this whole thing as being that from day one, and it just had to be chopped off at first for economic reasons. We still got the same guy here. It's still the same. It's still the same contact. The place wasn't finished.
Are there further questions and comments?
Could I make a response?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So just in terms of the Janine's comment about the scale of that elevation, the side elevations. One of the thoughts that I had here is that even with the step back, I don't know that your concern would really be addressed. And my main thought is that the view from the sidewalk, if you stop on the sidewalk and look down the spaces between the houses, that the length of that elevation doesn't impact you the way it does in a two-dimensional elevation drawing. So I'd just like for that to be considered when you think about this project.
Right. Well, Mr. Flory, let me ask you this. So what is it that you see from Northeast Street? I'm looking at your page A7, which is the new west elevation. And I think that the stucco does break up some, but the continuation of the long horizontal lines on the thing tends to emphasize the long length of that wall. And as I said, I'm more concerned about what are the neighbors going to see from whatever their street is around the corner, if that's East Street or whatever. So
right.
Help me there.
Well, it is East Street, and mostly you see foliage because of the trees, and there are currently fences along the corner property and shed structure in the rear yard that prevents seeing the entirety of that addition.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Comments or questions from members of the committee?
I have one more comment regarding the issue here at hand. In my gut feeling is that when we start talking about the point of reference for old and new, and that being that vertical, and even if the issue too is that how it affects the neighbors. Have you shown this design to your neighbors, JP?
I've shown it to I've shared it like weeks ago with the owner of both my the immediate neighbors to the left and right, as well as one further to Scott Fortenberry. They have their, I mean, you can't trust me on this, but I have their blessings on it.
And I think that's important to understand as we consider this, because again, I'm thinking about this relative to the neighborhood, the design and the details of how that separate, between old and new, I think is somewhat out of our purview, because this is the context for this one thing is that we still got the same designer, and that that issue of designating what was old and what was new is a real question in my mind based on this project and the building itself not being a contributing factor to the neighborhood. And by not putting that board in there, and by making sure that the neighbors are okay with that kind of length of wall like that, I think the problem solves itself, and that it's not something that we need to step into.
If I could also add that from my backyard looking east at 521 North Boundary, which extends much further back and is a much longer side facade. I'm not suggesting that that's a precedent for doing this, but it's a factor of this specific part of the neighborhood in this block. So I don't really see that what I'm proposing would be incongruous in that context.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm aware of the properties down the block also, and so I thought about that. I don't actually think we're making this decision based on whether somebody talks the neighbors into it or not. I think that the appropriate thing is we're to take the 30,000-foot view and think about it that way. And it may be that I vote for the project anyway, but I'd like for us to do it on the right basis here. And I do think it's important that it's a non-contributing structure, but I don't think it matters whether it's the same architect as the original or not. And I only give weight to whether whether the neighbors like it or not. Although we want to hear from them if they don't, but we're still going to have to call balls and strikes. Are there further questions? Any further discussion? Anything else from staff before we close the public hearing? Anything else, Mr. Royer, before we close the public hearing and try to get a decision made here?
I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Anything else from members of the committee? I propose to close the public hearing and see about a motion. Okay, I'll close the public hearing, and who would like to try their hand at a motion? Okay, Janine.
All right. I move that based on the evidence presented in this application and during the evidentiary hearing, that the committee finds that the construction of an addition is not incongruous according to guidelines section 1.3.1, 0.2, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 1.3.12, 3.2.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.9, 0.10, 0.11, 0.12, and the following suggested facts. 1, through 16.
Okay, we have a motion. There's a second. John Reese seconds the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Anybody want to amend it? All right, Verche, hi.
I just have a quick question, I guess, and maybe it's more of a general question for staff. So if, I brought up the point about 3.2.1, and this is all now included in the motion. However, through discussion with committee, it was deemed that some of these were irrelevant. So how do we handle that?
Staff here, you can make a friendly amendment to strike those guidelines.
Okay.
Okay, Verche, you got a friendly amendment?
Yes, I guess at least that we would strike 3.2.1 from the motion.
Agree, or do we need to make the comment about this not being a contributing structure? Would that be something to speak to? Because typically that would be an addition we're taking into consideration.
Yeah, I think we definitely should note that it's not a contributing structure.
And that is in the facts.
Yeah, it's fact one. This is Colette.
Okay.
Okay, we've got a motion and the second by John Reese. Any discussion on the motion? All right, I'll call the roll then. Rashay Height. Aye, she votes aye. John Reese votes aye. Janine McAuliffe, aye, and I'll vote aye as well. Now, let's see, who made the motion? You got a follow-up motion, Janine?
Yes, I do. I move that a certificate of appropriateness be approved with the following conditions, 1 and 2.
Is there a second to that motion? John Reese seconds the motion. Okay, Brashade second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Janine?
Aye.
John, aye. All three of you raise your hands. I vote aye. The motion carries. Mr. Royer, maybe you won't have to come back and see us again for a little while. Good luck with your project. You'll be dealing with staff from here. And so with that, we will switch to 410 Glenwood, the creamery, and we will and we'll move forward with that. And I will invite all who all plans to speak. I don't have to swear in everyone, I suppose, if you're not really planning on talking. We'll have Colette, and then I believe it was Collier Mars, Fred Belton, and one other I can't remember.
Also, Larry Miller and Myrick Howard should also be affirmed.
Okay, did Myrick get his documents turned in?
I just checked, he sure did.
Okay, good. All right, if you all will hear me out and then answer, do you and each of you swear or affirm that the testimony about giving the matter being heard to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do when I call your name. Colette?
I do.
Collier Marsh?
I do, and actually from the applicant side, we have, I think, a total of 4 people that will be speaking, albeit 2 very brief. And if it helps out for the record, I'll say it's Jason Davis, Morris Adjmi, Fred Belladin, and Lucas Posada are the ones that we expect to speak.
I got that, and then Myrick and Mr. Miller too, I believe. All right, so you heard the oath, Fred Belladin.
I do.
Fred, this where you say aye or whatever. I do.
I do. I'm sorry, the mute was a little slow to unmute.
Okay, Jason Davis.
I do.
Lucas Posado.
I do.
Myrick Howard.
I do.
Larry Miller.
I do.
All right, did I leave anybody out? Okay, will staff explain the project?
Nick,
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't hear Morris Adjmi or Collier Marsh.
We had Collier Marsh, I spoke, but we did not get Morris Adjmi on the record affirmed.
I'm sorry about that. Morris Adjmi, do you
I do, and thank you. I do, thank you.
I wasn't trying to keep you from talking, Morris, but if you decide not to, I'll be okay.
Thank you.
All right, now, Colette, will you explain this project?
This is case COA 0118-2020 for 410 Glenwood Avenue. It is the former Pine Street Creamery, a Raleigh historic landmark. The request is for the establishing a maximum building footprint and height for a future new detached construction within a specific buildable area and the removal of a rear addition. And if you look in the map there, the landmark boundary is the majority of the block, and that is what we are discussing today. Next slide. So this is a very large site. It is very difficult to capture in one photograph. So I'm going to walk you around the site in a series of photos. Starting with the north side on Tucker Street, this is a view of the parking lot and rear addition. Next slide. Kind of from the same area, this is looking towards the west at the part of the historic building. It's that same parking lot and rear addition. Next slide. This is a little further down Tucker Street, that historic part of the building. Next slide. This is from the Tucker-Glenwood intersection, looking at the main historic part of the landmark. Next slide. And traveling south on Glenwood Avenue, historic building. Next slide. This is one of the later additions to the building, still on Glenwood. Next slide. And this is the side of that addition that is visible from Glenwood. The part of the building that you can see to the right of your screen is not part of this application. Next slide. And this is a view from North Street. On North Street, it's primarily parking lot that that's part of the landmark boundary. Staff's suggestion is to discuss the height and massing of the proposed new construction. And the applicant did provide a presentation that they will go through.
Thank you. And we'd be glad to hear from the applicant.
Hi, this is Collier Marsh with Parker Poe. Again, we're the land use attorneys that are representing the applicant in this matter. I want to turn it directly over to the fact witnesses who you'll want to hear from on this one. And so just kind of for sake of housekeeping, we'll start with some brief introductions from representative of the owner, Jason Davis, then Morris Ajmi, and then we'll have the bulk of the presentation presented by Fred Belladin and Lucas Posada.
Okay, that'd be great. We'd be glad to hear from you, Mr. Davis.
Good evening, and thank you for having us this evening and for taking the time to discuss our proposed development. My name is Jason Davis. I'm a managing director at Turnbridge Equities, where I'm responsible for our projects throughout the Research Triangle. Turnbridge is a vertically integrated owner, operator, and developer of real estate nationally. We have mixed-use projects in Raleigh, New York, Washington, D.C., Miami, Austin, Nashville, and Los Angeles. Along with my partners, we've developed in urban mixed-use settings nationally, and we've completed projects in historic districts and involving historic landmarks that respect the context and the fabric of the surrounding community. When we made the decision to invest in the creamery, we were particularly attracted to the historic character of the original creamery building and how it contributes to the Glenwood South neighborhood, which has combined historic buildings with new construction to create an authentic and vibrant district. With that in mind, we've assembled a renowned design team of Clearscapes, who I believe you all know, and Morris Ajmi to help us propose a development that would preserve and highlight the character-defining elements of the historic creamery building while developing new uses that will benefit the community on the underutilized land to the east of the historic building, which Colette highlighted, creating a backdrop for the preservation of the creamery. With that, I'll hand it off to our design professionals, Fred Belladin of Clearscapes and Morris Ajmi and Lucas Posada of Morris Ajmi.
Okay, thank you. Y'all keep going.
So I'll jump in real quick before Morris. Is the presentation supposed to be up on the screen? Not because I like all of you. All I'm seeing is your faces.
This is Tanya here. I can put it up if you tell me to. I've got it ready to go.
Okay. If you don't mind, that would be great. And then Morris will start things off for us. Thank you.
If I can just start. Thank you, Jason. I'd like to thank the chair and the commissioners and Tanya and the staff. I'm Morris Adjemi, and I'm here with Lucas Posada from my office and Fred to talk to explain the project. I have an office in New York as well as here in New Orleans, where I grew up and where I developed a passion for historic architecture. And I too live in historic district. Our firm is focused on creating buildings that respond to the context and respect history, but not mimic it. We're currently working around the country. We're really excited about this project, and our goal is really to create buildings that stand out by fitting in. Thank you. Fred?
In the interest of time, we've pulled a few of the pages from the overall application that all of you have seen to the front, and we'll use those slides to address the discussion points identified by staff in their report. As a reminder, this application includes 3 interrelated components. The first is the removal of the non-character defining portions of the building that were constructed outside of the period of significance identified in the National Register and the landmark designations. The intent of this approach is to return the building as closely as possible to its historic 1928 and 1947 massing. Second is the treatment of the historic 1928 and 1947 building itself. In this case, it's specifically notable for what we are committing to exclude from the project. There will be no additions next to or on top of the historic building. There will be no new construction adjacent to the historic building. And third, while it's not part of the COA per se, the owner's commitment to preservation is evident in the planned preservation easement, which will exceed local landmark protections. The intent of this approach is to ensure that the creamery maintains its historic prominence on Glenwood Avenue and in the Glenwood-Tucker intersection. And then lastly is the urban infill construction proposed on the balance of the site, which is what will allow for the preservation of the historic creamery. As the staff report does not raise any significant discussion points for the first 2 items, we're happy to answer any questions on those at the appropriate time. Instead, we'll spend a few minutes of our presentation addressing the guidelines identified in the staff report for further discussion. Okay. Second reminder is that this project is being submitted as a 2-step COA process. This application is for the overall height, massing, and step back, including the removal of the non-historic portions of the building. A second application will be submitted at a later date for the full architectural design. As each of the guidelines that have been referenced in the staff report contain elements of both, we'll try to identify what we expect to include in the next COA application moving forward. Next slide, please. We'll start with a bit of historic context. This slide highlights the periods of construction of the Pine State Creamery Complex. As described in the National Register and Landmark designation, its historic significance is the architectural design of the cream-colored Art Moderne portion of the building, specifically its prominence on Glenwood Avenue, and particularly with the tower at the Glenwood and Tucker intersection. In the slide that you're seeing before you, the first 2 images on the left are the 1928 and the 1947 portions of the building, and in the elevation they extend from the tower at the corner to the secondary tower, about 3/4 of the way down the elevation. The surrounding portions of the built complex are not considered to be historically significant and do not fall within the period of significance for the property. These are indicated with the remaining 3 photos to the right and the tower and the tripartite elevation you see on the far right of the image. And then lastly, while the surrounding portions of the site are part of the designation, the site itself is not highlighted in any way within the designation report, and it's not considered to be historically significant. In fact, the entire site was scraped and significantly altered as part of the 1997 renovation. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of the area surrounding the Pine State Creamery site. While this is a landmark site, the historic structure will inevitably be viewed within this evolving surrounding urban context. Today, this includes a mix of low, mid, and high-rise structures with an ever-growing number of planned mid and high-rises. As you can see in this view looking south towards downtown, many of the taller buildings that are proposed or have recently been constructed in the area are located on the eastern edge of our site along the railroad corridor. We'll show you how this has informed our massing placement in the upcoming slides. Similarly, RHTC's earlier rezoning recommendation letter for the project also highlighted a preference for 20 versus 40 stories, which has also informed our approach to the proposal. Next slide, please. While Guideline 3.3.1 was not one of the guidelines identified in the staff report, we think it's important to begin here, as this is the guideline that really establishes the overall framework for our historic approach to the project and our organization of the site. Specifically, all of the new construction proposed is located well behind the historic building when viewed from the main thoroughfare, Glenwood Avenue, and is visually and physically separated by continuous public open space, which is highlighted in orange in the floor plan or the site plan diagram to your right.
I'm not sure Lucas has the ability to unmute.
I think if you guys can hear me, I can unmute myself now, so. All right, good. Thanks again, Fred. Again, I'm Lucas Posada, Studio Director with Morris Adjmi Architects. I'd like to thank all of the commissioners and staff for taking time to review our case. We wanted to highlight this slide to talk about the Warner specifically, or the pedestrian street, which is an important element in our design. This Warner, shown in red, cuts through the block in the north-south direction, which leads to a public plaza along Glenwood Ave and will create much needed outdoor public open space. This Warner establishes separation from the historic building and allows us to concentrate new development on the existing surface parking lots to the east end of the site along the train tracks, as opposed to building on top of or directly adjacent to the historic structure. We feel the separation is important to not crowd or overpower the historic landmark. This will also allow the new massing to stand on its own, thereby anchoring it to the district as a whole, where buildings of this scale are either built or currently proposed. Next slide, please.
3.5.2 is the first of the guidelines highlighted by staff in the report for discussion this evening. When we talk about heightened mass within a historic context, it's typically through one of two lenses, either as an addition or immediately adjacent construction that directly impacts a historic building, or as infill that impacts the feel of a broader historic district. This case and the site is unique in that it doesn't really fit into either of these views. Pine State Creamery does not have a character-defining site. It has evolved continuously since its initial construction in 1928. Similarly, this site does not exist within a homogeneously scaled historic district. Rather, the historic 1928 and 1947 portions of the Creamery building remain the constant within a changing, now non-historic urban landscape. To address this unique condition, our proposal creates the visual and functional equivalent of a public street and square around the entire perimeter of the historic building. In this way, the Creamery retains its historic position and prominence in the streetscape, while the overall architectural and urban scale of the new construction is allowed to recede and become part of the surrounding urban context, visually and physically separate and distinct from the historic building. Conversely, as an urban backdrop to the historic Creamery, the architectural design, which will be submitted in the next COA, will visually link the new and the old to celebrate the architectural design of the historic Creamery.
The diagram at the top right of your screen shows our proposed massing and how the first step back is meant to relate the datum line of the adjacent two-story Creamery building. By picking up on this massing, we establish a general relationship between the two buildings. We've also included examples of this approach from built projects in our own portfolio of work, projects located either in or adjacent to historic districts all over the country. As you can see from this example at the bottom of your screen from a project in the Gansevoort Market Historic District in New York, this change in massing can be emphasized with a change in pattern or material to create emphasis and further strengthen the relationship to the surrounding context. The image at the top left shows an example from the Lafayette Square Historic District in New Orleans, where the material is consistent, but a change in window pattern and articulation helps differentiate the lower podium from the upper levels of the taller mass. This continual dialogue between the new and existing architecture is something that we established early in the massing strategy, but we'll also speak to in further slides as we discuss details, materials, window patterns, and other articulation. And this will ultimately be described in much greater detail in a future COA application. Next slide, please.
Guideline 3.5.4 speaks to the importance of the building wall line. In our case, this site touches the building wall line on Glenwood, Tucker, and North. We are not proposing any new construction fronting Glenwood Avenue on this parcel. All new construction will be 147 feet behind the front elevation of the historic building. At the side streets, both Tucker and North, the height of the new construction will match the two-story cornice height of the historic parapet at the building line in order to maintain the street wall, and will step back 18 feet to relate to the dimension of the historic tower. An additional step back at the 9th floor will relate to the surrounding mid-rise construction.
We feel that stepping the tallest portions of the building back from the street wall is important in establishing a strong and cohesive pedestrian environment, and especially in this case where the new construction is meant to support and enhance, not overpower, existing historic structure. Images at the bottom of the screen are an example from an infill project located adjacent to low-rise, historically contextual buildings in the Williamsburg neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. In this project, the strategy was to step back the tallest portion of the building 30 feet from the street wall. This is effective in helping relate the low-rise podium of the new building to the neighboring historic fabric and reducing the perceived height and presence of the taller portion of the building. The proposed massing diagram at the top of the screen describes a similar approach. As Fred mentioned, the 18-foot step back along Tucker Street and the 147-foot step back from Glenwood Ave will have the effect of establishing a strong street wall at the north and south ends of the site while reducing the perceived height and mass from Glenwood Ave. Next slide, please.
3.5.5 is the last of the guidelines identified in the staff report and speaks to the importance of architectural design and how rhythm, order, and human scale are utilized within historic architecture. This will be central to the architectural design in the next COA application.
As Fred mentioned, the design of the new building will be described as part of a future COA, and we're looking forward to submitting that full design proposal. But for now, we've included some images from our portfolio of work that describe our general approach and a design philosophy for how the architectural details work together with the massing concept to create a building that is sympathetic to the adjacent historic context. The image at the bottom of your screen from the Lafayette Square Historic District in New Orleans shows how the design of the ground floor is of particular importance in order to enhance the pedestrian experience and to differentiate the base of the building from the upper levels. The image at the top left of your screen shows a window surround and brick detail from a project in the Lower East Side Historic District in New York. Here, the windows are carefully scaled and proportioned and trimmed with a white precast concrete surround to create a deep shadow that plays along checkerboard masonry facade. These checkerboard and corbelled brick patterns are typically found in historic buildings of this district. At the top right, 408 Greenwich in the Tribeca North Historic District in New York relates to its neighbors and other historic buildings in the area by clearly defining datum lines on the facade. This helps to strengthen the relationship between the new and existing architecture. This building is articulated with a traditional base, middle, and top using precast concrete and metal panels. The building's facade spacing, shapes, and forms can be found in historical architectural details from the district. Next slide, please. And here you see the full massing and site plan diagram side by side, showing the key principles that we've discussed. The new building is set back from the character-defining portion of the historic creamery building by a distance of 44 feet and set back completely from Glenwood Ave by 147 feet. The WNRF activates the space between the existing building and the new construction, creating a vibrant and active space that moves north-south through the site and arrives at a public plaza that fronts Glenwood Ave, creating a much-needed public open space along this busy pedestrian corridor. Setbacks along Tucker and North Street help establish a strong street wall and relate the massing to the adjacent creamery building. An additional step back at the 9th floor relates the massing to the surrounding mid-res buildings in the area. These step backs also help reduce the perceived height of the mass by pulling it away from the streets and concentrating it inboard to the site. Next slide, please. This street view from the corner of Glenwood Ave and Tucker Street looking southeast shows the existing conditions on the left and the proposed massing on the right. The massing is set back from Glenwood Ave and allows the historic tower of the creamery building to maintain its prominence on the corner. As you can see from the image on the left, the historic building exists within a broader urban context, with taller buildings visible to the north of the site and to the east of the site beyond. By locating the proposed height and mass at the east end of the site, far from Glenwood Ave, we anchor the new construction to the broader urban context and allow the historic creamery building to maintain its identity.
In conclusion, we believe that this proposal represents a historically appropriate approach and is not incongruous with this unique landmark site based upon the reasons for historic significance that are outlined within the landmark designation. The approach includes preserving the character-defining historic building in its entirety, including a commitment to no additions or construction adjacent to or on top of it. Includes the selective removal of the non-contributing portions of the building in order to highlight the historic building and to restore it to its historic setting. And lastly, locating the new infill construction, the equivalent of a full city block behind the front of the building, shaping its massing to blend with the surrounding urban context, and committing to an architectural design to be submitted in the next COA that will celebrate the historic architecture of the Pine State Creamery. With that, we thank you for your time, and we're happy to respond to any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. See, who else wants to be heard? Myrick Howard, Larry Miller, I'm not sure who all else. Okay, who wants to, are there others that wish to speak for or against this application?
Nick, it's Larry Miller and Myrick Howard. Why don't you just call and tell us which one you want us to unmute?
That's fine. We'll start with Myrick. He's further up the list, so we'll hear from Myrick Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Myrick Howard. I've been with Preservation North Carolina for 42 years, which is astounding to me. And one thing I want to point out, I was involved helping advocate in the legislature for the 365-day demolition delay back in 1988 and for the tax credits in 1997, both of which play into this site. Pine State was one of the early renovations for Glenwood South. Amazing to think, almost a quarter century ago. An example of how the then tax credits helped jumpstart the renovation of that historic district or that historic area. This proposed addition, I think, is real significant in having the new building not touch the historic building and have the new building set back from Glenwood so it doesn't overpower the historic building. There's a tremendous amount of development pressure in that part of Raleigh now. Just it's kind of amazing to think how not long ago it was that you had Fincher's restaurant there on a one-story site. That completely has changed that area and will continue. So we've got some challenges as preservationists that we're going to have to figure out and get used to and figure out some solutions. The owners here have been discussing the notion of putting a preservation easement on the historic building, which we hope will indeed happen. Everything points in that direction, which is really important because the 365-day demolition delay that sits out there, and I'm not saying that this is not threatening from their standpoint. I'm just saying, having dealt with preservation all these years, the 365-day demolition delay is no longer a meaningful disincentive for demolition. Unless you have a cooperative owner, it really doesn't help you out. And I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. The Borough's Welcome Building was on front page of Newsom's over a few days ago. Durham County, internationally famous architect. Really, you could say internationally famous building. We found that the owners are basically saying it would take them 2 extra years to get the permits to renovate the building than it would take to just tear it down and build a new building on the flat site. That is really discouraging. It's not landmarked by Durham County or Durham, so the horse is out of the barn. So even if we had 365 days, would it matter? They wouldn't have the permit to build something else or to do anyway, or to do their renovation. It was interesting back with the Crabtree Jones house, which we worked with y'all on. It took us a full year to get the rezoning of the buffer done so we could move the house. If we hadn't had a sympathetic owner who would work with us, we could not have saved that house in 365 days. We would not have even had the permit to do the house in 365 days. And then most recently with the Graves Fields house, it took us. So again, I say this from the standpoint, we're really going to have to start figuring out how to use these various tools in a interlocking way. And fortunately, in this case, we've got owners, buyers who are willing to have that conversation, willing to put the historic building under permanent protection, so we don't have to worry about the 365 days anymore. So I encourage you to look favorably on this application, to build a taller building while at the same time preserving the historic building. There are questions, I'd be glad to answer them now or later.
Thank you, Mike. We certainly understand the idea of having a conversation at another time about what tools are needed and how we might do things better. And I could give you plenty more examples that I would say this, that where this application is far superior, but we need to move this agenda too. So Larry Miller, I'd like to hear from you at this point.
Certainly.
Thank you. As you may recall, I provided some comments about the zoning proposal at your prior hearing. I'm a resident here, a neighbor of this property, and president of the Glenwood South Neighborhood Collaborative. However, now I'm going to put on my blinders and only look at the proposal before you for the massing and site plan. And I have to say that we are pleasantly pleased with the proposal. It meets our expectations. I think, and I'm not an architect, so I'm talking as a layman, but with the step backs that preserve the lines of the historic building, the further step backs that would be consistent with the mid-rise buildings around here, the separation from the historic building for this building site, all are attributes that we would support. So I just want to say we're looking forward with anticipation for the architectural designs for this structure, but we have no opposition to this proposal as presented. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Miller. Are there other comments from anybody that's not on the committee? All right, I'm going to turn to the committee. I'm not closing public hearing, but there are other comments or questions from members of the committee. I would say, frankly, that I wish this team was involved in several other projects I could point to around the city that are not as, have not been as sensitive. Now, whether this one is perfect is another question. But these people are working on it, and I give them a lot of credit for that. John Reese? Oh, okay. I thought you had your hand up. Anything else? Verche Height, you got a comment or question?
Yeah, I have a question about the actual creamery building, and maybe it's just kind of a question for committee members that have more experience and staff. How does that get assessed? Is this, are we handling the additional building and just kind of as a separate thing? Because I'm just curious, when we review the landscapes and landmarks and wanting to know what their intention is for the actual creamery building out beyond kind of removing the non-character defining aspects of it.
Well, I think I'll let Tanya comment in a minute, but I think that the idea here is the entire site was landmarked, as well as the two buildings that they're discussing for preservation. And so because of that, we're being asked to look at the massing, et cetera, as it relates to the rest of the site. But I think it was Mr. Belden, maybe it was one of the others, that pointed out that denomination and designation didn't really place a lot of weight on the parking lots and didn't really place a lot of weight on the buildings that were later very functional additions that are slated for removal. And so I don't know whether that answers your question. Tanya, do you want to say any more?
Sure. I will say that with the next application, with the design of the actual building, should you approve this, then if there are going to be any changes other than removing the non-historic piece, they will bring it up then. So, they certainly understand that no changes can be made without getting the approval either from the commission. So we do anticipate seeing that later if there are any changes, but it sounds like they're just going to do a rehab.
So Verche, then to the extent there are these additions that maybe are non-contributing or are not viewed as significant, then our role might be limited to waiving the 365 days because they're on the site to allow the thing to move. And we will get an opportunity at that later time, I think, to talk about whether or not there is a preservation covenant in place and what steps are there to assure that the creamery building and the 1940 whatever edition are likely to be preserved even when ownership changes, and which I think would be a matter of concern for us. But we don't have to have all of that right this minute. All right, are there further questions or comments from anybody? Questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay, anything else from members of the public or the applicants before I close the public hearing and see about a motion? 7:20, and I'm intending on concluding whatever we get to tonight by 8 o'clock. So with that, all right, I'm going to close the public hearing and call on Janine McCullough to make a motion.
All right, well, I will make a motion. I move that based on the evidence presented in this application and during the evidentiary hearing, that the committee finds that removing an addition is not incongruous in concept according to guidelines 1.3.1.2, 2.6.1.2, and the following suggested facts 1 through 9. And establishing a maximum building footprint and height for new detached construction within one specific buildable area is not incongruous in concept according to guidelines. Section 1.3.1.2.6, 3.3.1.2.6.7, 12, 3.5.1, 3.5.2.3.5.7, and the following suggested facts 1 through 10.
Okay, you heard the motion. Is there a second to that motion? John Reese seconds the motion. And so I spoke a while ago when I talked about not that we would be dealing with those demolitions later. We tend to that now. All right, so there's a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All right, I'm prepared to.
Mr. Fountain, Nick?
Yes.
May I interrupt just a second? Staff did not consider, and typically y'all have not considered removal of an addition as a demolition and therefore not subject to the 365-day delay. That being said, staff, of course, was suggesting that it's approved, but just wanted to point that out.
Well, I think rather than have a problem, I'd rather have a provision in the next motion that the 365-day delay be waived as relates to removal of those structures, so that, I mean, we don't know, but there may be issues later by people other than us, and so maybe that's just a good precaution to take in here. Anyway, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, Jenny McAuliffe? She's in favor. Verche Height is aye. John Reese? Aye, and I vote aye. And now for a follow-up motion, Denise.
Conditions.
You need to.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I think that's, okay, there we go. Yes, I move that a certificate of appropriateness be approved with the following conditions. 1, 2, 1 and 2.
And is there a second to that motion? John Reese seconds the motion, and I would propose to add to it that the 365-day delay be waived as respects to removal of the buildings proposed for removal.
Agreed.
Just as a precaution. All right, so that was that amendment was satisfactory, and I'll call for a motion, a vote on that motion. And Janine McCullough votes aye. Verche Height votes aye. John Reese votes aye, and I do as well. And to the applicants, I'll say you're doing a good job. We may not always love you, but we do appreciate what you're doing. And so we'll hope to see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you all.
Okay, with that, we'll move.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, guys. And we'll move to 527 Euclid Avenue, the shed and the accessory structure. That's file number 123. And that's Ashley Morris, Shane Smith, Patterson Martin, and Aaron Morton. If you will listen to this oath, do you and each of you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give, no matter being heard to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Aaron Morton?
I do.
Ashley Morris?
I do.
Shane Smith?
I do.
Patterson Martin? I don't hear Mr. Martin. Is he not going to be speaking?
Here he is. I should be here now. I'm having to do my phone because my computer's messed up.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
You heard the oath and you say I do.
Yes, I did, and yes, I do.
All right, thank you for that. And Ms. Morris, you'll remember the earlier discussion we had where you're not acting as an attorney, you're acting as a fact witness in describing the project and placing the information in front of the committee. You understand that, do you not?
I do.
All right, Aaron, would you explain this proposal to us?
Sure thing. This is case COA 0123-2020 for 527 Euclid Street in the Oakwood Historic District. The proposal is to demolish a shed and construct a new accessory structure. Next slide. This is a view of 527 Euclid from Euclid Street. Next slide. A partial side elevation view away from the driveway. Next slide. And the remainder of the photos take us down the driveway toward the proposed location of the structure. So this is from the right of way. Next slide. about halfway down the driveway, approaching the rear yard. Next slide. This is the existing shed and rough location of the proposed structure. Next slide. And the rest of the rear yard and property line to the west. Next slide. And a photo of the rear elevation headed back towards the street. Next slide. Staff suggestion is to defer to allow time for a design revision. Next slide. And new information provided is a revised design, decreasing the height of the proposed structure by 12 inches, and also examples of similar projects.
Okay, Ashley Morris, we'd be glad to hear from you on the project and particularly walk us through the proposed changes.
Yes. So the owners would like to create a accessory structure in the rear yard, take the shed down that is not historic. The thought is that they needed to create a little bit more space, but in addition is difficult with the current house. It has been completely renovated and there is a kitchen that stretches across the back. So the accessory structure will allow them to create an area for a workshop on the bottom, but also an office space upstairs. The good thing about an accessory structure is that you are not damaging the historic house or the existing house. There is a shed that's already there. There is the drive, the brick drive is already there. So the impervious surface really doesn't change. Mass to open space changes by, I think, 1% or 7%. It's not much. We did look at the staff comments about the proportion and massing, and tried to find where we could take out 12 more inches so that the structure is still viable as a 1.5 story structure. So we reduced the ceiling height upstairs and then took out some of the dimension in the framing between the floors as well, just to help reduce the height as much as possible, but still have usable space. Some of the height is coming from trying to protect the trees. There are quite a few trees on the back rear yard property line and then also on the side property line. So the owners have worked with an arborist to understand how to create the structure that they want to without harming or damaging the trees, which means that we have to put the structure on piers, which is causing an extra 18 inches of height that, if we could do the garage on slab, we wouldn't have to accommodate. There are a lot of garages on Euclid Street. We showed kind of a streetscape towards the end of the additional information. There are quite a few that are very prominent right on the street, basically. And then across the street, there is a 1.5 to 2 story garage on 515 Euclid, I believe. So there was some question about proportion of historic garages versus what we have done, and we also showed some examples of similar proportioned garages and some that are in that 1.5 to 2 story range as well. And we'd be happy to take any questions, comments. And Shane might want to say some words too, I'm not sure.
All right, I'd be glad to hear from Shane Smith, and then I'll come back to Ashley with a question.
Okay. Thank you all for your time. This is my third home in Oakwood. I've participated in the renovation and preservation of those 3 homes. I know that this has been a controversial topic, the idea of accessory structures. In this particular case, the home is quite small. It's under 1,000 square feet, and this is really truly the only opportunity to have space for storage, and as mentioned, an office space. I really do love the neighborhood and would hope to have this opportunity to give us a little bit more room, especially now that we have a new child. That's really the motivation behind this. Thank you again for your time and look forward to answering your questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Actually, my question is, I saw the north elevation, but I'm wondering what is, does this tower over the properties to the rear, does this grade continue to decline down the hill on past this proposed structure? What's going to happen to those neighbors?
So the rear neighbor, it does decline a little bit, but it's not as big of a drop as what we've got going on from the street view. And there are a lot of different sheds and garages surrounding their property. The houses next door or adjacent both have 1.5 to 2 story dormers. One was an addition that was done recently, and the other one has dormers to the rear as well to create that 1.5 story. So it's not going to be standing out because of the context that's already on the street. It's not going to be standing out as uncharacteristic, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. I think the accessory, the addition on the house to the east is concealed better than this one, so it makes it a little bit different.
True.
In this particular case as well, it's somewhat concealed because of the grade. It's downhill and it's behind the fence as well, so from the street it would actually not look like a 2-story structure.
Correct. And
or excuse me, a 1.5 story structure.
And there's
Okay,
quite a few large trees around it.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
That's okay. I was just saying that there's quite a few large trees around it as well to help break up the visual of it.
I don't know whether that was one of our committee members or a mammal, but I get the sentiment. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee? John Reese?
Hang on. Oh, okay. I just got a quick question. I don't see any information about the new driveway. Is there going to be a new driveway, or what's that, or is there?
There is no new driveway. It's already there. It exists.
Okay. So you're just going to take away the section that the new accessory building is going to inhabit, I assume.
Correct.
Okay, good. That's on it.
Yes, actually also the previous owner I believe put the brick over the roots on the existing trees, and this actually should help give them a little bit more space and not cover up the root area around the trees.
All right, thank you for that. Are there other questions or comments? All right, any further discussion? Before I close the public hearing, Janine, you got a question on your mind? Okay, not. Anything further from the applicants? Anything from staff?
Nick, we do have Patterson Martin to speak.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Martin, we'd be glad to hear from you too.
Did you get me unmuted, Ray? Hello?
You're fine. Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, okay, very good. Wanted to be sure. Yeah, I had sent a statement to Tanya. I can read it for you if you like it. It's just a few lines. It won't take that long. And then I'd like to point out a couple of things. I live directly behind 527 Euclid at 518 North Boundary. That's my house. You can see in some of the shots they were showing. And I do have concern about the size, particularly the height of the new accessory structure. I know the plans provided do show that the new structure will appear to be shorter than existing dwelling a few from Euclid. However, from the south side, the rear side, or my perspective, it's a pretty imposing structure. The building it's replacing is about 11 feet tall. This is going to be around twice that tall. And it's going to be 5 feet from my property line. I was just referring to 2 or 3 things. Your RHDC guidelines 1.6.5 and 1.6.11 maintain the traditional height and proportion of garages and accessory buildings in the district for 0.5. Point 11, not appropriate to introduce a garage or accessory building. If doing so will detract from the overall historic character of the principal building of the site. I do think that one of their comps that they were showing was a building at 525 North Bloodworth, which shows a 1.5-story structure, but it seems to me the existing dwelling at 525 is a lot larger than what's here at 527 Euclid. So the proportion is not going to be the same. I think it's going to compete, with the existing dwelling for visual dominance on the site. And I was looking at the drawing from Pell Street Studios. They're showing 3 bricks for a pillar with no dimension given. The existing structure here is about 20.5 feet tall if you scale it, or the one they're wanting to build is about 20.5 feet tall. And they said they're going to take a foot off of that. I still wonder about only 3 bricks being, that shows an 8-inch pillar, which is not that big of a brick pillar underneath the structure. I'm not sure, since there's no dimension given on this drawing. That would be Pell Street's new front elevation of accessory structure from the south side, which I think is their second drawing in the list that was given me. So I've got a question about whether that pillar really only going to be 3 bricks high, or will that actually add more height to it than what's being shown by this scale drawing? I don't really have any objection to any new construction on this site. I just like for the owners to consider enlarging the footprint if they could in order to create approximately the same square footage in a 1-story dwelling. And barring that, if I could, maybe ask Ashley to reconsider this south side view of it and maybe use some clear story windows, since there is one already on the existing structure, just to provide a little privacy for myself, any future owners of my property, and also whoever's going to be inhabiting the new structure. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. We need to hear all that. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee of any of these speakers? What's the sentiment of the committee with respect to the new material and the earlier comment from staff about deferring? John Reese.
I think the neighbor gave me some information that I wasn't considering as much as I should. Because I think the verticality of this thing, given the fact that it could be smaller, it may have a sense of being overstuffed into that little corner vertically. So I'm thinking about that. And
All right, thanks for that. Janine McAuliffe, your thoughts?
Well, I was sort of rolling through some of the new materials and comparing the precedents, just this examples, I should call them, of what are called 2-story garages, although some I don't think are 2-story. But I think one distinction that strikes me when I look at this is a lot of these have a hierarchical relationship that feels more appropriate and seems to be more of what's going on in the districts to the primary structure. Meaning, I'm looking at 513 Bloodworth. It's called a 1.5-car garage that looks as if it has living space above it, and then you've got a significantly larger house adjacent to it, and that feels right. And just because this property dips down, it makes me kind of wonder about that relationship and whether it's the right, I guess it's back to 1.6 let me get the right one here. Maybe it's 11 of how it's going to, I'm sorry, or was it 0.6? 6.5, how it's relating in size and scale up to the principal structure. It's 1.6.5. And I do have pause that this one is just sort of extruded just because of the topography in a way that isn't sort of keeping with the district.
All right, thank you for that. Verche, did you have thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I would agree with Janine's sentiments about, the scale as shown kind of gives me pause. And in addition to the revised kind of 1 foot that's been taken out of it, I think in the way it's been articulated and looking at the elevation, it doesn't read as something, again, that's a kind of complement to a larger structure, which is the house. And I think that the property owner, the adjacent property owner's concerns, even regarding some of the elevational decisions with fenestrations and openings, are valid and should be reconsidered.
All right, thank you for that. John Reese?
I just have one other question, and that is there any evidence at all, because I didn't see any in the application, about accessory structures that are possible around there now, garages, that kind of thing, that are 2-story?
Well, I think she referenced one next door, but that one is sort of behind the house, and it's different in that way.
Right. I think that there's, again, our charge here is to talk about the neighborhood as much as we do the actual structure itself. And, one of the things that I'm looking at relative to this is questioning the congruity of that new structure relative to the existing context.
All right, well, let me ask you all this. Is the inclination of the committee to defer the application in light of these comments and carry that over till next month or until the applicants are ready to come back? All right, as I see everyone nodding, I need a motion. All right, John Reese.
I make a motion that we defer this project until they have more opportunity to respond to some of the comments that are made today.
All right, is there a second to that motion? Janine McAuliffe seconds the motion. Any discussion? All right, I'm going to call for a vote then. All in favor, Janine McAuliffe, aye. John Reese, aye. Verche Height, aye. And I'll vote aye. And so Ashley and folks, that's an opportunity to go back and rethink it. It was sort of foreshadowed by the comments of staff, but now you hear a little more from the committee on how this is being perceived. And so we'll let y'all have another look at it and rethink your potential solutions, and hope to see you soon. So thanks for that. The next matter is number 130, and that one is 316 East Cabarrus. And let's see, that would be Brian Steffen, Matthew Griffith, Zach Hoffman, and Aaron Morton. If you will hear this oath and then respond, I do. When I ask you, do you and each of you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give, no matter being heard to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Aaron Morton?
I do.
Brian Steffen?
I do.
Matthew Griffith?
I do.
Zach Hoffman?
I do.
Okay. With that, we'll, Aaron Morton, if you'll explain the project.
All right, this is case COA 130-2020 at 316 East Cabarrus Street in the Prince Hall Historic District. The proposal is to construct a rear addition, raise the existing structure, raise meaning pick it up off the ground, not demolish, install new windows and door, remove chimney, install rear fence, and change exterior paint color. Next slide. This is a view of 316 East Cabarrus Street from the street, front elevation. Next slide. This is a view of the west elevation of the property. It's fairly close to the property line. Next slide. A view of the east elevation and accompanying driveway on site. Next slide. This is a view of the rear of the original portion of the historic house. Next slide. And this is what remains of an early addition to the project. There was a previous addition, 1950s addition, on this portion of the property that was removed by a previous owner, and it sits open to the elements currently. Next slide. And this is a contextual photo of the rear of the site where the proposed addition will be. Next slide. Staff suggestion is to defer to allow the applicant time to attend the Design Review Advisory Committee to revise the design and provide additional materials. Next slide. And the applicant has provided new information in the form of a presentation. So we'll give Tanya just a second to set that up.
While she's setting that up, Aaron, what's going on with DRAC at the moment? Are they meeting?
We have begun meeting virtually with DRAC, yes. We have several applications where the requirement was waived, and this is one of those because they were not back up and running at the time of application.
Okay, Mr. Stepp, who's going to speak for the applicants here?
I'm going to speak first as the owner, and then I'm going to turn it over to In Situ to do the presentation.
Well,
So,
identify yourself. So, identify yourself and go ahead.
This is Brian Steffen, so I'll go ahead.
All right, thank you.
Yep. I'll keep this brief in a matter of time. Thank you to the committee for allowing us to be here tonight and to listening to our presentation. My name is Brian Steffen, one of the owners at 316 East Cabarrus Street, in addition to my fiance. I've been a resident of the Prince Hall District for 5 years now, with my fiance 4 years. As a couple that's getting married soon and planning to start a family, we're committed to this community and neighborhood and are excited for the chance to revitalize this historic house. With the house being built in 1909, honoring its historic past throughout our design process while adding space for our growing family has been very important and meaningful to us. Being a drainage engineer by trade and passionate about sustainability, we've incorporated concepts into our design like a green roof and green courtyard while making sure to maintain the height of the existing historic house. These have allowed us to keep the addition low impact for the environment and the neighbors around us. Being a current resident of the neighborhood has allowed us to get to know our neighbors well already. Seeing so many residents living here for such a long time really drew us to the house right away. We've tried to keep them updated from the start, and everyone is excited to see the house come back to life, given its current condition and being one of the last ones on the block still vacant. We welcome and look forward to the committee's feedback and adding to this house's history. I'll now turn it back over to Zach and Matt for In Situ for a presentation on more of the details of the house. Thank you again.
All right, thank you, Zach. You and Matt, go ahead.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks to the commission. Thanks so much for being up so late. We'll try to keep this brief. We actually have a presentation that's fairly long in the number of slides, which we're providing some supplemental information, some clarifications, and some revisions. We'll try to skip quickly through slides that we think are information you already have. As Brian already stated, we're very familiar with the kind of historic significance of this.
Yeah, and so if you'll move quickly, since the idea is to defer, and we've got two others that really hope we won't adjourn without hearing from them tonight.
Okay, and just to ask, are you suggesting that we not present the clarifications and revisions that we're proposing based upon staff comments? We want to use your time well.
We were going to be deferring because we may not be able to assess everything that you brought up in relation to what the staff had done. I'm not sure that staff's had all the opportunity to comment that they might want. And so that's my concern. But you and staff know a little bit better what you got and whether it's really going to be appropriate for us to move tonight or not.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. We actually talked with staff earlier this week or late last week and confirmed that this would be a good use of time. So if you don't mind, we'll just move forward. We'll try to keep it brief.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yep, thanks. We can go to the next slide. I'm sure y'all are familiar with this already, but we just wanted to show this aerial image to show the relationship between the proposed addition and the historic house. The historic house has a texture on it that on the roof that looks like shingle roof, and the proposed addition is in the rear in a slightly lighter black color. You can see that the footprint of the addition in terms of the gabled portion is nearly identical in scale and even a little smaller than the existing house, and they're connected by a courtyard and a lower green roof. You can go to the next slide. Here's an image of the project from the rear, again showing the relationship in scale between the existing house and the proposed addition, and also showing the relationship in scale between the proposed addition and the neighboring house at 318 Cabarrus, all being one story and single gabled forms. Next, please. We have answers to a lot of the comments that staff made for this meeting. We'll go very quickly. There's a question about what we would be using for the existing house shingle, which was information that was requested of us before this meeting. You can see the image here of a very standard dark shingle. Next, please. Same with the skylights for the existing house. This is a Velux fixed curb mounted skylight, a very common product used in the historic district. You'll also note that the only skylight we have on the existing portion of the house is on the rear face of the roof. And we've worked on other projects in the historic districts that have had this exact same product approved. Next, please. There were some concerns in the application about the design of the front door and the inclusion of a new side light. We had done that to try to make the front facade symmetric, which it currently is not. This revision proposes removing that side light and maintaining the existing historic transom, and then having the new door obviously be a divided light door. This is very much in keeping with the front door at 314 Cabarrus next door, which is a project we renovated several years ago that also came through the RHTC committee. So this is a proposed revision that you have yet to see. Next, please. Also a revision, our original submission had 4/1 windows. The existing windows in the house are 4/1. We were asked to change these to 4/4, which we're happy to do. And so this is a revision to comply with that. Next, please. There was concern about the relocation of a side window and the change in the sill height of that window in our application. We're actually familiar with this neighborhood and familiar with all the historic districts downtown. All of us live downtown. And the position of side windows on the side facades and their either head or sill heights seem to vary significantly. We are proposing the relocation of this window to be replaced with an historic style window to accommodate a new kitchen, and the sill heights being lifted so we can put a counter in. Next, please. There was concern about the replacement of siding. These are two images of both the exterior and the interior of the existing siding. From the exterior, you can see that the siding in some areas is in ill repair, but more importantly on the interior, there is no sheathing on this building and no building paper on this building. And you can see from the interior of the siding that there is a significant amount of water that gets in on a regular basis. And so we'll really have no choice but to remove the siding. Our concern is that the historic siding will be badly damaged and maybe irreparably damaged when we remove it to properly seal the building. we'd be happy to replace it with any material that the commission deems appropriate, including actual wood, or if we are using some sort of composite material, which has also been approved in the district before, we would use a thicker profile so that you get the kind of pronounced overlap between boards. So just a clarification on that point. We are proposing that the addition be dark in color, and here we've identified 2 potential dark colors. We are proposing the use of a solid opaque stain, which we realize is not common in the historic district. However, dark stains are the most durable finish you can put on a wood siding, which is what we're using on the addition, and are much more long-lasting than paint, which tends to peel and need repair much more often, which is why we had chosen to do that. We would propose the final color selection and even potentially a switch to paint, if you're more comfortable with it, be a condition of the final COA. Next, please. There was a question about building mass. We just wanted to clarify this. The existing condition has 16.7% of the site covered with building mass. And with our addition, the total new building mass will be 34.7%, which is roughly twice what's there now, but still well under many historic sites in this district and other districts throughout the city. Next, please. There was also a concern about the massing and scale of what we're proposing. Again, you can see this aerial view where we highlight the original house in comparison to the also one-story addition that's almost identical in size and form to the existing house. Very close by, within a block in 2 different directions. We're familiar with projects that have recently been approved by the RHDC that have a very different kind of proportion that's allowed. Guest House Raleigh, which I think we're all familiar with, is a 2-story house that had an addition approved that's roughly 3 times the size of the existing historic building. And then at 520 South Bloodworth, this one was really surprising to us, but it's a 2-story addition that was approved on the back of a 1-story existing house that is also roughly 2 to 3 times the size of the existing project. So we think that in comparison to these, we've been very sensitive to the scale of the neighborhood and to the project. Next, please. There's a question about what our roofing material would be. We're proposing on the addition a standing seam metal roof that will be dark in color. Again, something you see throughout the district. Questions about the monolithic treatment of gable ends and a lack of trim. Our goal with this project was to match the mass and scale or be appropriate with the mass and scale of the building, but then make the project clearly discernible from the existing structure by separating it clearly from the other structure, and also using details that are derivative of the older structure, but clearly distinguishable. One of the most important things is that on both sides, we are stepping in when we come back. The east-west side is pictured here. We're stepping in about 2 feet on that side. And on this east side, which is pictured, we actually have a really deep courtyard that separates the new structure from the existing historic structure. This also, by the way, would make it more than possible to remove the addition with no damage to the existing historic portion of the home. Next, please. There was a request that we repair existing gutters, downspouts, and soffits and eaves. That is our plan to do. Some of them are in very bad shape, and so that will be part of the project, and happy to make that a condition of approval. Next, please. Yeah. Real quickly, you're using the same skylight on the addition. The question was asked, what are we proposing? So the exact same flush curb-mounted skylight. Next, please. There's a question about the green roof, and with the comment that this would be the first green roof in an historic district. Without being too smart about this, we actually think this is a strength of the project to be approving the first green roof in an historic district. The city of Raleigh already supports green roofs through their rewards program, which we would be pursuing. And we think the capacity to bring kind of a new level of sustainability into the historic district and to set precedent for that would be a benefit to this project and all the historic districts throughout Raleigh. Next, please. There was a question about the windows. We will be replacing the kind of tattered and in some cases non-historic windows in the existing building with historic Lincoln aluminum clad wood windows. We prefer the aluminum clad window, which has been approved in historic districts in the past because it's much more durable. If the committee or if the commission prefers, we would be happy to use all wood windows if that's necessary. But these will be 4/4 windows as mentioned earlier. Next, sorry, Tanya, next. There was a question or a concern about the southwest corner of the project being a glass-to-glass corner, which is without precedent in the district. We actually would propose adding a solid wall on the west side so that we no longer have that condition. And this is a supplement and revision. You can see the proposed change here. Happy to discuss that further. Next, please. There was also some concern about or changing the site or an inconsistency in the presentation that some drawings seem to show quite a bit of terracing and fill on the site, and others seem to show keeping or maintaining existing topography. The image on top shows the topography of the existing house on the site. The image in the middle shows a section through the length of the house with the addition and a porch off the rear and terracing down to the rear yard. And the east elevation, this was the point of confusion, maintains the existing grade to maintain driveway access for the neighbor at 318. Next, please. There was concern expressed about using stucco on the foundation of the existing and new structure. We will be needing to repair very badly damaged or very badly out of shape existing foundation. And new foundation materials will not be brick because they are we would prefer them not to be brick because they're not as durable as concrete, which is what we would prefer. And our intent here was to finish everything with the same stucco. There is precedent in the district for stucco on foundations and other wall surfaces, including right next door at 318 Cabarrus. And we would propose that the color be a condition of the final COA. Stucco on the building wall of the addition was frowned upon. We're fine with changing that. In fact, we would propose replacing it with horizontal siding as shown here in this revision. Next, please. There was question about the vertical wood siding and the use of stain. We're aware of the fact that stain is not as commonly used in the historic district as paint. However, a dark stain on wood is much more durable from a maintenance standpoint than paint. And actually, nearly across the street at the 10 of South Person, there is stained wood on the street facade that was approved. We also are using a vertical wood. The wood siding we're proposing is actually a rain screen. Back in 1909, the leading technology was to have a small eave overhang and a water table at the corner to protect the building from water. In 2020, we like to use rain screens as a much more durable and weatherproof wall. These are conditions we're open to discussion about, but that's why we are where we are. The color is dark. We did that of the addition is dark. We did that to distinguish between the addition and the existing structure. This is very similar to the house across the street at 432 South Bloodworth, which has a very dark color that was approved. Next, please. Thankfully, y'all can follow along and see we're almost done. There is an ePay screen. We provided some more information about that to the staff. The goal with this is to maintain privacy for the courtyard that's between the proposed addition and the existing building, but also create separation between the two. So we're trying to maintain privacy for our clients, but also clearly distinguish between the existing and the new. I'm sorry, we don't have that last slide was just about materials in the courtyard. We don't have a lot of information about that right now. We would just propose that the planting plan be the planting plan approval be a condition of the final COA. Next, please. There was a question about the site wall. We are proposing that a site wall continue out into the yard. Right now, a lot of water runs from 314 onto 316 into the backyard of 318. And we're actually using this wall and the terracing and grading and the green roof and water collection measures that aren't a part of the application because they don't need to be to control this water and move it responsibly off the site. So that's why it's there. And then a question about the specimen tree that we're proposing for the rear yard. We've considered saucer magnolias and Japanese maples, which are both common in the historic district. We'd propose that this be a condition of the final COA. And the last slide we'll leave you with is just the front of the house. This is the house lifted up. Currently, the front porch is right at grade, and the front siding is actually below grade. We're proposing to raise the house up to a level that is more similar to the neighbors at 318 and 314. This is an important image because it's a view from the street, and it's pretty obvious that you cannot see the addition at all. That was a very important part of this project for us. We thank you so much for all the time. Hope this wasn't too much information, and we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there questions or comments? Let's see. Anybody else want to speak on the application or the comments from staff with respect to the new materials?
This is Erin. There are a lot of new materials and answers to staff questions provided in that presentation that haven't been addressed in the staff report yet. I would suggest deferral simply so that staff has the opportunity to weigh in on the congruity of those proposals and help you guys shape up for the next meeting when you do hear it. The good news is that when it does come back, it'll be considered an old application and can be heard at the top of the meeting when you guys are prepared to dig into it. I think most of my concerns could be addressed through the staff report for you in a more organized fashion.
Okay, thank you for that.
It looks like Nick may have lost signal for a minute, so let's just wait for him to head back in. Nick, it looks like we have you back, but you're muted. Do you want to attempt to take the meeting back over?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know what happened, but I got kicked out. I don't know whether y'all intended that or not. So anyway, are there any comments? Any comments from members of the committee before we defer? Anything you want to pass along to the applicants for feedback as they think about it? Janine McCullough.
Well, I actually had questions, and now I realize I think I will happily let Aaron clarify some of what I think needs clarification. Specifically, was going to ask about the windows because I thought we did understand that they were 4/4, but I guess we think the applicant says they were originally 4/1, but those are details. So I will let that kind of come out of the wash before the next time we see this.
Okay, thank you. John Reese, anything? You're muted.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got two questions that I don't understand just yet. There's nothing in the drawings about the green roof. It's still showing standing seam siding or, the standing seam. And I'd like to understand more about how that works, as well as how the addition touches the existing house, because as I understand it, you're supposed to step things back, and you said you step back 2 feet, but nothing in the drawing suggests that there's actually 2 feet there. It seems to line up. Which I got to tell you, at the courtyard line, that's a question for me in terms of if it's got an open space that separates the two buildings, is that screen considered a fence, and then can it then be basically attached to the flush with the face of the house? But then the cornice element or the horizontal section of it comes right in and is showing in the drawings that it is right at the flush face of the existing trim. And so I'm just questioning, is that copacetic? Is that following the guidelines? Because I thought the whole thing had just those.
So that'll be so John, that's feedback, and we will let them see if they can clarify those thoughts and answer your questions, but it doesn't have to be done right now. Rashay Height?
Yes, I agree with what's being said so far as deferring this. And I would also just add, I feel that a number of the staff suggestions at the end of their original report regarding clarity of the drawings throughout, that be maintained and updated and submitted.
Okay, thank you for that. I will note that the roof garden thing looks like it's totally hidden from the street, and that might bear on how we might think about it, even if we haven't had one before. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to entertain a motion to defer. Janine McAuliffe makes a motion to defer, and John Reese seconds the motion. In discussion, all in favor, would signify by saying aye. Rashay Height says aye. John, Janine, all of us, and I do as well. So that matter is deferred. We thank you for the presentation. We look forward to you all sorting this out, and we'll look at it again next month. So at this point, I want to find out from the rest of you, y'all prepared to keep going and deal with these last two that we have? If you were prepared to hang in, we'll keep on going. But I don't want to kill anybody. Okay, then we'll go to number 131, and that was, yeah, that's Wills Forest. And we'll hear from, and Meg McLaurin, are you still available? And Colette? Then I will administer the oath. You and each of you swear or affirm the testimony about to give the matter being heard to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If so, say I do when I call your name. Colette?
I do.
Thank you for that. Meg McLaurin?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, now Colette, will you explain the project?
All right, this is case COA 0131-2020 for 616 Wills Forest Street. It is in the Glenwood, Brooklyn Historic District, which is a street side historic overlay district. And the application request is to partially enclose the front porch, install solar panels, install a driveway, and relocate retaining wall. Next slide. So this is a view of the property from across the street. Unfortunately, there are two very large trees that make it very difficult to get a good photograph of the property. So if you'll bear with me, we'll do some partial details here. Next slide. So this is on the east side, a view of the area of the porch that is proposed to be enclosed. And the grassy area is also where the proposed driveway would be installed. Next slide. This is a view of the front porch looking towards the east. Next slide. And this is a view from the west side. The roof line is where the proposed solar panels would be installed. Next slide. Staff's suggestion is to deny the partial enclosure of the front porch and the installation of solar panels on the front roof facing Wills Forest Street, and to approve the remainder of the application with conditions. Next slide. Oh, sorry. There was nothing else.
Okay, thank you for that. Meg, we'd be glad to hear from you now.
Okay, well, I would, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Well, I would like to clarify I think if you consider this a side porch, that perhaps the guidelines might give a little leniency to this because it is not really the front porch. It is was with duplex at one time, and that is how the second floor was accessed, was through that porch. I have looked at the staff report, and I know that they think that the wraparound porch is a character-defining feature of the house. And I agree that the tapered columns are a nice feature of the porch. I would suggest that maybe there could be some better detailing of the enclosure to make it more transparent. And I have been considering that, and because I have seen porches, parts of porches enclosed, not only in this district, but also in Boylan Heights, and I'm not sure that I researched Oakwood, but I'm more familiar with Boylan Heights. So I have seen when they have been enclosed, if they are somewhat transparent and they have more detailing that favors a porch being enclosed, that that could perhaps eliminate some of the objection.
Meg, we'd be glad to see all of that evidence that you might be able to develop if you take a little time and do that. Can you talk to us about the solar panels?
Well, I think in those photographs you were actually able to see that that you cannot see that top roof from anywhere, either because of the trees that block it on the front side or because of the angle of the roof. So I think the photographs were there to exhibit that you couldn't really see that plane of the roof very well. That is the only plane that faces south, and that is, of course, the best direction to use for solar collection. So I think, I'm not sure that those photographs were mine. They could have been done by staff, but maybe they were mine. And I never could see much of that roof without really having to look at it. So I mean, really having to look for it. So that's why I was thinking that maybe if you said, well, it wasn't that conspicuous, that you could, rather than read the letter of the law, as John said earlier in a meeting, you could sort of go with the spirit of the law, which is that you really don't even notice that roof itself much. So that's what I was, and I have not specified any solar panels, and I haven't looked into solar shingles. This was just sort of out there as a test case, like could it even be considered if you could consider that an inconspicuous location because in fact you can't see it.
Okay,
so that's what I was going to say about the solar.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Meg.
Did somebody ask a question?
No, I want, this is Nick. I just want to be sure you were done.
Well, I would like to hear your comments because, and I assume we're going to be deferred to provide some other detailing for this porch enclosure. But I have stuck with this meeting for 3 hours now, so I'm hoping to get some commentary.
We're gonna give you some feedback. I just wanted to be sure where you were before I turned to get that feedback for you. And so with that, I call on the members of the group to comment. And I guess I would certainly wonder whether there is surface on the west-facing roof down the west side that would work pretty well as a panel anyway. I understand the difference between south and west, but still. Might think about that while we are going through the other things. Are there comments from the rest of you, John Reese?
As you guys know, this is my neighborhood, and I know this house very, very well. And interestingly enough, on Wills Forest, unlike any of the other streets in this neighborhood, most of those houses on that street were built, the larger ones anyway, with a wraparound porch. And I wouldn't call it a front porch. I wouldn't call it a side porch. It is a wraparound porch. And that's a very distinctive kind of architectural sense about it. When you look at the front elevation of this thing, it is a completely symmetrical design, which basically takes in the sense of that open porch. The open porch sets it up as asymmetrical, but the length and width of that overall length, including that porch, is completely symmetrical to that door. And I have seen so many, and I don't know if there's even one left, except for this house, that still has a wraparound porch. And every single time I walk past all the other houses across there, I go, God, wouldn't it be nice if they took that room or that addition or that thing where they turned it into a rental home and filled it up and stuffed something in there. It just looks like a complete short-sighted understanding about what that porch is for and how relevant it is to the climate and the culture of being a southern porch. So I'm going to have a very difficult time being supportive of.
I take that as a no.
He's being fairly candid, Meg. I'll say that for you.
But this one's kind of tough for me because it's just not because I even see today the amount of activity that happens on that side porch versus the amount of activity that happens on the front by the owners, and they're on that side porch all the time, which makes it's the side section of the wraparound. Let's just keep it that way. Okay, but
all right, thanks for that, Janine McCall. If you got any question or comment.
I guess my comment would be that I actually would be interested. It sounds like maybe there'll be a little bit of thought about some sensitivity to what that actual enclosure might look like. But because I have seen porches enclosed before, and it does have a very different look than the way you see it in the character of it when it's wide open. So I think that's something to certainly think about, and think about how, if there was anything to enclose it, how it would easily be removed without any damage to the existing structure.
Okay, thank you. Rashay, do you have feedback you want to offer?
Yeah, I would agree with John and Janine's comments, but I also have an additional comment about the solar panels. I know, there's talk about trees being there, so you wouldn't see it, but we have to think about the time of year where trees are full versus when the leaves fall off, and you definitely see the roof. Happen to look at the kind of Google Earth Street View where the leaves are gone, and you would definitely see those solar panels up on the roof. So I would, if they can be relocated, that would be preferable.
All right, thank you for that. Anybody else have any comment? Then I'm inclined to entertain a motion to defer. Who would like to make that motion? John Reese makes a motion to defer. Janine McCullough seconds the motion. And this one needs to have a little bit more thought. So we'll call for a vote on that motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand. So I see 3 hands raised by Verche, Janine, John, and I vote aye as well. So this one is deferred. And so I think you got your feedback, and it's a chance to rethink what to do with it. And I think folks really would like to, I also think that your thoughts about what you might learn from looking at some other things and how enclosures can be made sensitive would be educational. I don't know whether it will change everything, but it would be a useful bit of information, I think. So with that one is off, and we will turn to number 133, which is 724 North Blunt Street, and the question of chimneys. And Richard Burkholz and Aaron Morton, if you will hear me as I administer the oath, do you and each of you swear or affirm the testimony about to give in the matter being heard to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Aaron Morton?
I do.
Richard Burkholz?
I do.
All right. Well, thank y'all for sticking with us to this point. Aaron, will you explain the proposal?
The case is COA 133-2020 at 724 North Blunt Street in the Blunt Street Historic District. The proposal is to remove chimneys. Next slide. This is a photo of 724 North Blunt Street from the street. In this photo, you can see what we are calling the character defining chimney prominently to the left, and the secondary utility chimney, the top of it is visible towards the right of the structure. Next slide. This is a close-up of the character defining chimney. Next slide. And the utility chimney. Next slide. Staff suggestion is to approve with conditions. Next slide. Oh, that's it.
Okay, Mr. Burkholz, we'd be glad to hear from you on this proposal.
Okay, I'd just like to say that thank you for sticking around and hearing us out. We've been working hard since we acquired this property in 2017 to, I don't know how to put this delicately, to correct a lot of matters of deferred maintenance from prior ownership. And we've done a full renovation of the inside and made it a fairly nice hair salon. And this is the final piece of the puzzle, trying to get the metal roof on, which was previously approved. And we run into the stumbling block where we can't move forward with the roof because of the condition of the chimneys. And now we've been through a couple of pretty severe storms, and we're actually taking in water, causing quite a bit of damage on the inside. So we're trying to move forward with removing these chimneys so that we can get our roof on and protect our investment.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Are there questions from members of the committee? John Reese.
My question is, this house is currently no longer a residence and will never be a residence again because it's been zoned commercial. Is that correct?
I suppose it's conceivable that it could be upfitted again for residential use, but that's highly unlikely. That's not our plan.
But the property would have to go through a rezoning.
I suppose so. We have no intentions of it ever being a residence again.
Okay, that's a question that I wanted to kind of keep in the back of my head first.
Other questions? Other members of the committee? But he may be setting in here. I'm not hearing much.
Are we in the comment phase, or we're still asking questions?
Still asking questions. We haven't turned to internal discussion, but let's be sure we've got everything that we want before we turn to talking among ourselves. So Janine McCullough.
Thank you. Yes, I guess the question I had on this was just the obvious one of how have we determined that this chimney cannot be repaired, the one that we are calling the character defining chimney.
Well, we have a reputable roofer, Brian Pedersen of Raleigh Roofing, and his initial inspection of it when he was quoting us for the new metal, standing seam metal roof that is going on was to repair what's there. But once he dug in deeper, he found that it was way beyond repair. You could see the pictures of actually tumbling mortar and grout. So it is actually posing a threat to the future roof by leaving it. And it can't be patched any more than it has. You could see the obvious poor workmanship in the previous repairs. So it's going to need to be completely torn down, not all the way to the inside, but just from the roof line above. And right now we're just trying to, in a position where we need to get a roof on it so we no longer are taking any more water in.
Mr. Burkholz, I would ask you if you had anybody who is a brick mason or I'm not sure the roofer is the best person to opine about the chimney. And I wonder if you sought any feedback from brick masons on what they might be able to accomplish before we go take it down. And I don't want any water to be going in there either, but we've got some responsibility to this historic fabric. So what are your thoughts, Mr. Burkholz, on my question?
Well, our contractor is pretty experienced and has installed several roofs in the Oakwood area, the surrounding area, and has a lot of experience in dealing with these chimneys. And he has a mason that he works with, but we can't get on the books with him. Masons these days are few and far between. Most of them gone out of business or no longer working. So I've been having a heck of a time even sourcing more estimates or more opinions. And we're at a point now where we can no longer wait anymore with what we've got going on inside because of these chimneys.
Okay. Mr. I understand that. Further questions? I'm sorry, Tanya, did you get ready to say something?
I did. I just wanted to comment that that staff observed the unfortunate repairs that have happened over to the chimney over the years, and in our experience with what we had seen, we were not terribly concerned with the removal because of that, provided it be built back with the same corbelling as is already on, is on the existing chimney now, in combination with what the applicant's roofer had said in the application. There's something else I was going to say, but I forgot it. But I just wanted to bring that up.
All right, thank you for that. I will say, if it were mine, I would be riding over to Custom Brick, and I'll be asking them who's the brick mason we need to get up there, and they will know that they will have those names. But that's okay. I hear what the staff's saying too. Are there comments or questions from the rest of you?
I'm at real 6s and 7s about the incongruity of taking this chimney out. And I'm at 6s and 7s. I don't know what the right response is. I think about this relative to, saving a chimney which has no redeeming value whatsoever other than the fact that it was there. And it is actually causing more problems than it's worth these days. And the amount of money that this man's spending to have that put back, only that, because I've got to tell you, I drive by this place all the time, I've never seen this chimney. It has never been.
So I would like to point out that we are looking at the design guidelines, that we are not considering the cost that's going into it.
Understand that. That's, wash my mouth out with soap for saying that word. But the intent here is that how much value do we put on this chimney? That's my question.
Well, I don't know. I'll disagree with you. I place value on them, particularly when they have the corbelling and all that. And it's not a bad policy to let those utility chimneys and what may have been an old kitchen come off of there, but the one that would have been for the living room maybe ought to remain. But on the other hand, if the staff is of the view that in their experience, it's going to be awfully hard to make anything out of this one, but we just ought to rebuild it, then I'm not going to rely on the railroad track about it. Are there questions or comments from the rest of you? Anything, Verche? Okay, no. Janine, anything else? All right. Any other comment before we close the public hearing? Mr. Buckholz, anything else? Aaron, anything else?
The only thing I'd add, these chimneys or these fireplaces on the inside have been decorative for decades. They have been out of use for a very, very long time. So at this point now, they're just costing us money. As you mentioned, they're now causing problems.
Right. I hear you. And after all, our responsibility is only as to the exterior anyway. So, all right, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Does one of you have a motion you want to make? Is there discussion? Verche? Okay, Janine, you want to do it?
Oh, was there a discussion? I'm sorry.
No, I don't know if there's discussion or not. Do you want to make a motion and then we'll see about a discussion?
Sure, I'll make a motion. Get the right case here. Yes, I move that based on the evidence presented in this application and during the evidentiary hearing, the committee finds that the proposed work to remove utility chimney is not incongruous according to guidelines section 2.2.1 and 2.5.1. However, removing a character defining chimney is incongruous according to guidelines 2.2.1, 0.7, 2.5.1, 2.5.5.7, and the following suggested facts 1 through 8.
Is there a second to that motion? Verche Height seconds the motion. Any discussion on the motion? I'm going to call for a vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Janine says aye. Verche says aye. John Reese is at 6s and 7s. All right, he's no. I will vote aye as I might rather say the original, but we can move to the next motion and address the rebuild. Okay, Janine, can you make that motion?
Yes. I move that a certificate of appropriateness be approved with the following conditions. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Is there a second to that motion? Verche Height seconds the motion. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye. Janine votes aye. Verche votes aye. John Reese votes no, and I'll vote aye. And that motion carries. And so, Mr. Buckholz, you got your marching orders. The rain's coming. Go ahead and get going. Thank you, everybody. And I know the agenda calls for post-mortem, but it's very nearly mortem at this point. So maybe we'll just save the post-mortem until later, unless staff has something significant that we need to address.
No, I think we do need to do a postmortem. I don't know that tonight is the time to do it, given that's late. I also think October is already looking pretty full, and Janine won't be here in October, so we will look at finding another time for 30 minutes that we can squeeze in and have a chat before the October meeting. And I'm done.
Yeah, I don't know. Are we still taping for public, or can I make a behind-the-scenes comment?
No, it's fine. We can stop the recording.
Anyway.
We're not going to take any more action.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to make a really quick comment, and I think this will be something we can talk about later. But this was a really good example of, I think, some cases that just came with a lot.
I would just like to start to say that the meeting has not been closed. It is still online right now.
Okay.
Until the meeting is closed.
In any event, it's unfortunate that we ended up spending all this time on 3 of them that needed to be deferred and obviously needed to be deferred. And
that was my point.
That's okay. We'll get them right. We'll get them right, and we don't always do it fast. And but we're going to get better projects as a result of our combined efforts, and hopefully the property owners will still invite us over for Christmas. So, okay.
Sounds good.
All right. And so if there are particular thoughts, Tanya, on that what we needed to have a postmortem on, then I'm glad for you to utter those so we may among us remember them.
Now I'm drawing just a blank. I think just talking a little bit about how we did precedents and just a little bit more about guide speak.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, folks, thank you very much. Go fix yourself a grilled cheese. Tomorrow's a work day. You'll get another chance. Take care. See y'all later.